Hey guys, hope you are well. So, welcome to the Anime Fictions 2.0. This is the story about what if Naruto neglected by his family and had kekkeigenkai. Hope you will love this what if. If you did, do subscribe for more awesome what if. Share with your friends and enjoy them. Check out the other videos I have created. Comment down your opinion. Share with your friends. So, without wasting any time, let's jump into the first part. If you two keep progressing at this rate, I might teach you guys the Rasengan when you graduate the academy. Minato Namikaze, the Yondaime Hokage of Konoha no Sato, spoke happily while looking down at his two children. Narumi Namikaze, the lone sister of the two. She had Minato's bright blue eyes, generating warmth and happiness. She had a head of brightly colored red hair, matching her mother's perfectly. Minato gave a wide grin as he switched his eyes over to his other child, Natsu Namikaze, his spiky red hair already falling into his purple eyes. He was more like his mother, with his hot-headed attitude, while Narumi was more playful, but calm and collective when the need arises. Natsu was the firstborn, taking the place as the clan heir of the Namikaze name. Both children looked up at their father, their 6-year-old eyes shining with pride and happiness at being praised by their father. "Really Toussaint, you mean it?" Narumi said happily, her body jumping up and down in excitement. Natsu's smile threatened to split his face, his eyes shining. "Just watch Toussaint. We will pass you soon." Minato barked out a laugh, smiling wide as his eyes closed due to his laughter. "Don't think it'll be that easy. I'm still the Hokage after all." "I don't know, Minato-kun, after they master the Kyuubi's chakra they might be stronger than us both." Kushina Namikaze, the wife of Minato, also known by her allies Red Death. She came out into the backyard to see her smiling family. She was filled with joy. They all broke out into laughter again, their hearts filled with happiness. Unknown to them were the sad blue eyes looking down at them from the second-story window. This was Naruto Namikaze, the third-born child of both Minato and Kushina. He had his blonde spiky hair and with bright cerulean blue eyes. Looking so much like his father. His lips came down into a frown, looking at his family made his heart hurt. It wasn't until his 4th birthday that his siblings started to get special treatment. They got extra training, early lessons at the academy, presents for doing just about anything. Naruto wanted nothing more than to join them, to be a part of the family he desperately needed. It was always the same excuse. "Sorry Naruto, maybe next time." "Don't make a scene Naruto, you're embarrassing your siblings. They need to learn how to handle the Kyuubi's chakra." "That damn chakra," Naruto thought, his anger getting the better of him. Since birth Natsu and Narumi were given part of the Kyuubi's chakra that Minato sealed within them. Getting split in half and shared between both of them. While Naruto got nothing, only having the regular chakra reserves of a normal Uzumaki, well still a lot, nothing like his siblings. "I guess I'm just not special enough," Naruto whispered, letting it echo in his tiny room. He turned his head away from his family. His heart hurting just from the mere sight of their smiles. He walked over to his window, opening it, allowing a nice cool breeze to flow in. One foot after another he stepped outside, slowly making his way down to his front yard. He gave a small frown back to his house, his eyes started to glisten. He turned away, shoving his hands into his black shorts and started walking down the streets of Konoha. Shops were flourishing with life and the streets were very crowded. Laughing and talking echoed down the streets as people walked, in no hurry to get to their destination. Naruto gave a sad sigh. It wasn't the first time that he walked these streets, and it wasn't the first time he got utterly ignored. No one spared him a second glance, even with his family he was left to the side, forgotten. While he sometimes enjoyed the alone time, it hurt seeing his siblings get pampered while he got nothing. Sure, they had the Kyuubi's chakra, but there are plenty of famous shinobi that aren't Kekkei. Minato Namikaze, his Toussaint. He didn't have an ego, far from it. He just wanted to be seen as the son of the Yondaime, to be acknowledged. Not just a random child walking the streets. Naruto continued his walk with his mood turning more sour by the minute. He finally made it to his favorite spot in the village, Training Ground 99, hidden just next to the Hokage monument past the head of Hashirama Senju, the Shodai Hokage. Naruto walked into the center of the training field. On his left was a small little pond formed from a small little waterfall flowing down from the rocks above. He closed his eyes, adopting a thinking pose, raising his hand up, forming a hand seal. After a few long minutes a small blue aura surrounded Naruto. It was weak, about the size of an average civilian using chakra. And after a couple seconds it vanished. Naruto gave out a frustrated cry, his hands rummaging through his blonde hair. "Damn it. Why can't I do it? You're not letting it flow through your coils, you're just forcing your chakra through." Naruto spun around at the new voice, a small amount of fear creeping up inside him. He looked over and from a small forest clearing walked out a man. He was wearing a short black shirt with a very wide collar, with black shinobi pants to match. He had bandages going from his feet to his lower legs, with blue sandals. He had a small over-the-shoulder brown strap holding his sword in place on his back. He had his Konoha headband wrapped proudly around his forehead. The man smiled down at Naruto, his onyx eyes shining with mirth. He crossed his arms over his chest. "You're not letting your chakra flow. Instead of forcing it through your coils, try and control the amount of chakra you emit. Pushing it through would only cause backlash." Naruto was still a little defensive, but it did make sense what the man was saying. Taking a few steps back, he raised his hand, forming the familiar hand seal. He closed his eyes, taking in a deep breath as he felt his chakra pool start to sway. Slowly but surely he released a small amount into his coils. The small blue aura returned as before. Lasting much longer as it now started to lift small pebbles from the ground. About 5 minutes went by and Naruto fell to the ground exhausted. He tried to catch his breath as he looked back over his shoulder. The man was still there, a big smile on his face as he clapped his hands together. "Great job. That was a huge improvement." Naruto silently beamed at the praise, making his insides flutter with joy. "Thanks, mister. You're awesome." The man waved his hand, his smile never faltering. "Don't worry about it, I'm always glad to help young shinobi in training." Naruto's face lit up at the idea of being a shinobi, making him practically shine in excitement. He pumped his fists together, now sitting on the floor looking up at the man. "Yeah. One day I'll be the strongest shinobi ever." The man let out a loud laugh, making Naruto frown at him. His eyes narrowed as he pointed at the man. "Hey mister, what's so funny?" The man wiped a tear away from one of his eyes, his laughter having died down. "Just you have a long way to go, kid. But you remind me of myself when I was young." It brought back a lot of memories. The man took a seat across from the blonde, crossing his legs in the process. "And please, enough with calling me mister, it's making me feel old. I'm only 17 after all. You can call me Shisui, Uchiha Shisui." Naruto felt his eyes go wide, and Uchiha. They were one of the most prestigious clans to walk on Konoha soils. No, through the elemental nations. Naruto looked up at the now identified Shisui in awe. "Amazing. So do you have one of those red-eye things?" The older male nodded, a smile gracing his lips. He pointed up to his eyes. "It's called the Sharingan. And yes, most Uchiha are born with the jutsu, it's our bloodline." Naruto tilted his head to the side, a long blonde lock falling in between his eyes. He narrowed his eyes in concentration. "A bloodline? What's that?" Shisui raised an eyebrow in shock, not letting it leak through into his expression. Shisui knew who the boy was, Naruto Namikaze, son of the beloved Yondaime. From his time working for the Anbu, he heard that the Hokage's children were already getting early lessons from the academy before they enroll. Shouldn't Naruto understand the basics of being a shinobi by now? Well, a bloodline is a unique trait or abilities passed on genetically. You know the Hyuga clan, right? Naruto nodded. "Well, they have a bloodline, it's called the Byakugan. It gives them the ability to see far distances through objects and can even see around them in 360 degrees. Shisui looked on to see Naruto listening intently, his small bright blue eyes wider than saucers. "Wow. So what does yours do, Shisui-san?" Shisui smiled wide. "Our bloodline is called the Sharingan. It allows us to track our opponent's moves, counter-attack, cast a genjutsu with just a simple glance, and even copy other jutsus." "Wow. The Sharingan sounds so strong. Are you strong too, Shisui-san?" The taller male smiled awkwardly, his free hand rubbing the back of his neck. "Well, I would say I'm about an average shinobi. No stronger than our village's average jounin," he said with a chuckle. While he was one of the top-rated Anbu that have enlisted in the past 10 years, he tried to keep things more on the humble side. Unlike his Uchiha brethren who have taken a slice of the arrogance cake. He was grateful for his Sharingan, he understood the weight it held as a shinobi tool. Naruto's loud tone broke him out of his thoughts. The blonde continued talking while Shisui sat and listened, throwing in his 2 cents whenever it was needed. He looked up to the sky, it was already dark, maybe somewhere around 8 p.m. "Hey Naruto, don't you need to get home? It's already past 8, your parents must be worried." Naruto gave a low frown. His shoulders lowering down and his head staying stationary. Upon seeing this, Shisui cast a worried glance in Naruto's direction. "Hey Naruto, you okay?" Naruto refused to look into Shisui's eyes. He didn't want the same ignorant glance he would receive whenever he spoke about his family. "Toussan and Ka-san probably don't even realize that I'm gone. They are too busy with Narumi and Natsunai to pay much attention to me." Naruto spoke, his words shocking Shisui. Shisui adopted a gaze of worry. Why would the son of the Yondaime say something that sounded so untrue? "What do you mean, Naruto? Are you saying your parents don't notice you?" Naruto nodded, his tiny hands clenched into fists. "They already started training Narumi and Natsunai. I haven't got anything since my 4th birthday, just after they started training them." Shisui felt his eyes go wide, he couldn't believe what he just heard. He felt a sudden spark of anger course through him and an even smaller layer of disappointment. "I can't believe Yondaime-sama and Kushina-sama would do this to Naruto. Why would they? Of course. Narumi-san and Natsu-san are Jinchuriki. The Uchiha thought with disdain. That explains why the boy was always out on his own and how he didn't know what a bloodline was and by his struggle to maintain his chakra. He hasn't even unlocked it yet. He's probably feeling like he doesn't belong in that family. And tomorrow, October 10th. Hey Naruto. Come over here. Naruto did as he was told, taking a few hesitant steps over to the Uchiha, refusing to look up to the taller man. Naruto felt his blonde hair get pushed up. He felt a strong hand tangle itself within his locks. He looked up to see Shisui's hand on his head. His eyes shining with warmth, giving him an affectionate ruffle of his hair. Shisui smiled down at Naruto, how about I meet you back here tomorrow at around noon? And I can help you with the basics of being a shinobi. Naruto looked up wide-eyed. His stomach fluttering at the warm look gazing at him. It felt so foreign to him to receive anything other than the cold shoulder. Why would you do that for me? Naruto muttered. Shisui chuckled, letting his free hand gently scratch his cheek. I've taken a liking to you, kid, and I can see your potential to become a powerful shinobi. Naruto felt his eyes start to water, his stomach doing flips as he felt happiness touch his very core. He went so long without a mere smile. He crashed his small body against Shisui's torso for a tight hug. The Uchiha was slightly surprised but realized the situation rather quickly and offered a small reassuring pat on the back. Naruto let out a quiet sob. Arigato Shisui-san. His voice was muffled as he talked into the man's black shirt. Shisui chuckled. It's no problem at all, Naruto. Morning came quick to Naruto. After meeting Shisui at Training Ground 99 last night, the promise to see each other the next day was fresh on his mind when he got home. Like he told the Uchiha, when he got home no one batted an eyelash. When he walked through the front door, he could still see his family in the backyard in the middle of a full-on picnic. He would be lying if he said it didn't hurt seeing his family laugh without him. But his mood was significantly better than it has been for the past 3 years, so he raced upstairs and quickly got to bed. Falling asleep as soon as his head hit the pillow. He woke up at about 7 a.m., unable to hold his excitement any longer. He never left his room, he knew he wouldn't get called down to breakfast. He ignored the stinging pain in his heart as he opened one of the 4 textbooks he had in his small room and started reading. Learning all about the beginning stages of chakra and how it affects your body and the 5 major chakra types. Fire, water, earth, wind, and lightning. He continued his reading for what seemed like days. Finally glancing over to his clock, looking for the time. 11:45. He jumped out of bed, quickly grabbing a new set of clothes and leaving his room in a hurry. His footsteps echoed throughout his house as he ran down the stairs rather loudly. When he got to the bottom of the staircase he was greeted to a few familiar faces in his living room. His parents were talking to a shinobi who wore a mask covering half his face, his headband covering one of his eyes. He didn't quite remember his name though. He saw his brother and sister talking to Jiraiya Oji and Tsune Ba. 2 of the remaining legendary senin who have been there since the beginning of his birth. He looked upwards, his mouth dropping agape as he read the giant sign hanging in the wall. Happy birthday Narumi and Natsu. Naruto felt his heart drop in his stomach. A feeling of pure sadness pumped in his veins as he read the large banner. They forgot to put my name. My birthday. He couldn't stop the sudden cascade of tears that started to break out. He was so caught up in his time with Shisui he forgot about his birthday the very next day and it seemed like all did as well. Without waiting another moment he ran full sprint to his front door, opening it wide and slamming it shut behind him. Knowing full well that no one would question it or question where he was. He ran to the training ground, running as fast as his little legs could. Like usual the onlookers paid him no mind. The pain was sudden, all the built-up grief he stored away for the past few years breaking through its cage, griping at his heart. Making his stomach feel heavy. He arrived at the training ground in record time, he fell to his knees the second he reached the center, his hand covering his mouth swallowing a sob. Then Naruto? Naruto, are you okay? Naruto looked up to see Shisui running at him, the older Uchiha having arrived about 10 minutes early, only to see Naruto run inside the clearing crying. Naruto wasted no time and propelled himself into Shisui for another hug, his small hands gripping the older male's black shirt desperately, giving out a loud cry of pain. They forgot me Shisui-san. They forgot me on my birthday. Shisui felt his anger from last night's return tenfold. He tightened the hug around the blonde, quietly asking him to explain what exactly happened. Naruto then sadly told him of his experience, not missing a single detail. His sudden hiccups interrupted his words, but Shisui understood everything perfectly. Shisui waited until Naruto's crying came to a halt. After a few moments he pushed himself away, with Naruto rubbing his eyes with his hand. Hey, Naruto-kun. The boy looked up to see Shisui's outstretched arm, all he saw was a semi-large wrapped box with an orange bow on the top. Naruto sniffled and looked up at Shisui in confusion. Shisui rubbed the back of his neck. I was going to wait to give this to you later. But I want to give it to you now. Naruto hesitantly grabbed the box from his hands. Making sure his vision was clear enough, he slowly started to open the box. He removed the top part and his eyes shined with surprise, reflecting off his drying tears. Inside the box was an old Konoha no Sato headband. The metal plate was slightly damaged and the cloth around it was a solid green, showing the age. Naruto looked up at Shisui. The latter already knew what Naruto was gonna say. He reached his arm out and ruffled Naruto's hair once again. It's my birthday gift to you. That's my old headband from when I graduated the academy. I wanted you to have it. Naruto felt a fresh batch of tears forming around his eyes. He took the headband out of the box and held it close to his chest, the first real gift he ever received and one he will treasure until the day he dies. He hugged the headband tightly to his heart, his previous pain momentarily forgotten as he looked up, seeing the warm gaze of Shisui. Shisui Niasen. Thank you so much. The Uchiha ruffled his hair one last time before getting to his feet, his hands resting behind his head. Now let's get to it. You aren't gonna get stronger by sitting there doing nothing. Naruto quickly got to his feet, following Shisui, wiping his eyes for any sign of crying. Hi Shisui Niasen. Shisui chuckled and proceeded to teach Naruto the basics of chakra control and how to properly channel the chakra in your body. He looked at Naruto fondly, getting attached to the boy rather quickly. Breaking out into a goofy smile at his new nickname. Nissan huh? That doesn't sound so bad. It's been 3 months since Shisui had taken Naruto under his wing. Naruto had started to make slow but amazing progress. Well, he wasn't genin level in terms of strength, yet he was 10 times better than he was a few months ago. Shisui already finished teaching the blonde all about the basics of a shinobi, from chakra control to elemental jutsu, and the different types of methods that shinobi can battle with. While learning these methods, he and Shisui found the ones best suited for Naruto's future. While Naruto wasn't big on Fuinjutsu, which would have probably made his parents frown. He found unrequited love for Jinjutsu and Ninjutsu. He wasn't keen on learning Kenjutsu, and Taijutsu is a must for any shinobi for hand-to-hand combat. Another trait that Naruto excelled in was surprisingly, chakra control. After learning the fundamentals with Shisui, he was given a task to expand his chakra pool, along with learning how to control it. And after the 3 months he already completed the tree walking exercise and water walking. Feel the chakra flow through your body, not too much to overload your coils. Naruto, who was sitting in the center of his room, thought to himself, looking at the long sprawled out blue scroll that was open in front of him. His eyes scanned over the scroll for what seemed like the 100th time. This scroll was a gift given to him by Shisui about 1 week ago. It was his first attempt at a real jutsu, not the basic academy jutsu like Bunshin, Kawarimi, and Henge. No, this was his first attempt at a real nature manipulation jutsu. Having figured out what chakra nature he held, Shisui gave me a scroll to work on that corresponded with his nature. Flashback. Okay Naruto, this is called chakra paper, this will help you figure out what chakra nature you have. Naruto reached out and grabbed the paper from Shisui's hands. It was small, no bigger than his palm. He gave a frown and looked at the paper with skeptical eyes. How will paper help with nature chakra? Shisui chucked and reached into his pouch to pull out a second piece of paper. Well, let me finish Baka. Naruto sent a glare his way. This paper is special, it's made from a special tree that has chakra running through it constantly. With even a tiny drop of chakra, this paper will tell you exactly what chakra nature you have. Or in other words, chakra affinity. Naruto took a few moments to process the information. After seeing Naruto nod, he continued. Now Naruto-kun, watch. Just as Naruto had Shisui's paper in his sights, the Uchiha sent a small pulse of chakra into the chakra paper and it ignited into a small ball of fire before crumbling to ash in Shisui's palm. Naruto looked on shocked. As you clearly saw, my paper caught fire, meaning that my chakra affinity is fire. If your paper wrinkles up, then you have lighting. If it becomes wet and soggy, then you have water. If it splits in half, then you have wind, and if your paper turns to dirt and crumbles away, then you have earth. Naruto nodded, finally understanding. He looked down at the chakra paper in front of him. He sent a small pulse of chakra and the result surprised him. The paper was now completely drenched with water, the paper falling limp in his palm. Even Shisui raised an eyebrow in surprise. So that means I have a water affinity? Shisui nodded. His hand coming up to rub his chin. Yes. And a pretty strong one at that. Which is odd since I'm pretty sure neither of your parents have an affinity for water. You developed this all on your own, kid. He said with a chuckle, making Naruto beam. He reached into his pouch once again and pulled out a small blue scroll. Here, this is a D-rank water ninjutsu. I have a mission to go to, but I'll be back within the week. But I want you prancing this while I'm gone. Flashback end. And practice Naruto did, every waking moment was spent learning this low-level jutsu. The technique was water style. Spitting fish. A low D-rank ninjutsu that was mainly taught to academy students who lived in Kiri. It was a fairly simple jutsu, where the user lets out a single jet of water from the mouth. While not used for real battles, its main purpose used for infiltration missions and gaining people's attention. Okay, only two-hand seals. Inu, ram. Water style. Spitting fish. Suddenly a small jet of water shot from his mouth shooting off into his bedroom wall. It wasn't strong enough to create a dent, but the water dripping down was a sign of his success. Naruto's eyes lit up. He did it, he finished his first elemental jutsu. I did it. I finally did it, Shisui Niasen is gonna be so proud. Hey Naruto, keep it down up there. Now hurry and get down here, dinner's almost ready. Naruto faltered slightly at being addressed by his yelling mother downstairs. It was the first time he's been called down for dinner all week. Suddenly a light bulb appeared over Naruto, maybe he could finally show what he was capable of to his parents. Maybe they could finally start training him. Naruto raced downstairs to see his siblings already seated at the table, his two-san also seated listening intently to what they were saying. As usual, his family didn't say anything about his presence in the room, and if they noticed him, they didn't show it. He took the first seat he could at the end of the table so his Ka-san could sit next to Two-san. Two-san, Ka-san. Guess what I learned today? Naruto yelled, practically jumping in his seat. He didn't feel the annoying looks his siblings sent his way. Minato raised an eyebrow, finally seeing Naruto since he arrived at the dinner table. When did Naruto get here? Whatever it is, I'm sure it can wait, Naruto. Natsu and Narumi were in the middle of telling me about their training with Ka-san today. Naruto felt his face start to fall, am I really not important enough to them? That they won't even let me talk? Then Kakashi Niasen said that it was already about high genin level. Narumi yelled happily, with Natsu nodding his head along enthusiastically. Naruto saw his father smile wide. It felt like a knife was plunged deep into his heart. You guys are progressing so fast. How about after dinner me and your mother show you those fire and wind techniques we promised you both? Naruto snapped his head to his father in utter shock. His eyes went wide as the two remaining children yelled happily, yes please Two-san. I already mastered that low-level fire jutsu you gave to me last week. Natsu said loudly, making Naruto physically flinch. They already started training with their chakra nature. Kushina came up to the table, a big bowl of steaming ramen placed in the center, a huge goofy smile on her face. Oh yes, our little shinobis in training are doing just wonderful. Naruto listened to his family happily talk about how far Narumi and Natsu were along. And it only reminded Naruto by how weak he was in comparison. Sure, he had Shisui now, and he's been the happiest he has ever been in the last few months. But seeing this, his family was a constant reminder by how far behind Naruto really was. He was a shadow that the Namikaze family wanted to forget. He clenched his fists under the table, trying hard not to let any tears get by. Unlucky for him, Natsu saw his Otanto's sudden attitude change. While Natsu was slightly curious why his mother and father never really gave Naruto any attention and always refused the idea of training Naruto whenever he asked. He came to the simple conclusion a long time ago that he and Narumi were just more special than Naruto. They were the Jinchuriki of the most powerful Biju. Of course they would need all the attention they could get. An ordinary child doesn't need all the extra help. He felt a smug grin glide across his face, not realizing how the next few moments will drastically affect Naruto. Aw, is my Otanto sad that his siblings are so much stronger than him? Naruto closed his eyes tight, a few tears leaking out. Unknown to him, his mother and father were slightly worried about his sudden shift of attitude. Natsu felt Narumi elbow him in the side telling him to stop. That didn't deter Natsu. Of course, why would our parents waste time on such a loser like you? Shut up. Naruto yelled, his eyes opening wide as he tried his best to glare at his brother, each word felt like a dagger, slowly slicing him up. He heard his parents try and get Natsu to stop. But nothing stopped his onslaught. That's right Baka, you're a weak loser that nobody likes. And when I'm the clan heir, I'll make sure you get what you deserve and take you out of the clan. Shut up. Without warning, Naruto's chakra began to fluctuate, his hands moving at academy level speeds and using the jutsu he learned just an hour ago. Water style. Spitting fish. The small jet of water went ahead and shot itself over at Natsu, hitting him right between the eyes. His sudden rant was closed to a halt as he fell backwards, stumbling to keep his balance, bumping into Narumi and taking both down to the ground. Unfortunately, Narumi's leg caught the tablecloth and sent the large oversized pot of ramen to the floor, shattering into 1,000 pieces. Both parents reacted almost instantly, with Minato catching his falling kids, while Kushina grabbed Naruto out of the way of the falling ramen. Minato helped his kids to the floor, making sure they were on their feet before looking back at Naruto. Minato sent a cold glare to his son, hoping it would come off fatherly. How wrong he was. Naruto. I don't know where you learned that, but you never, and I mean never use jutsu like that out of a spar. You could have seriously injured your brother. Naruto's tear-stricken face morphed into fear. His father's cold eyes looked down at him while his mother looked over her two kids for any damages. But, T2. No buts. I want you to apologize for attacking your brother like that right now. Minato said, his arm pointing over to Natsu. While Natsu wasn't in any pain, he was shocked to see the use of a water jutsu. He heard his sister mutter how disappointed she was in them both. But he didn't care, he kept his smug grin as he watched his little brother try and apologize to him. Naruto couldn't stop the sudden tears, he was getting yelled at, not the brother who called him useless, weak and a loser to the clan. He couldn't find his voice, his tongue now felt big in his mouth. All words gone, and now fear and sadness flashed in his eyes as he looked at his father. An angry and disappointed glare looking at the 8-year-old. I am, SS. Minato shook his head irritated. That's it. Naruto, go to your room. Since you won't apologize, you get no dinner today. I expect an apology to the whole family come breakfast tomorrow morning. Minato said, his eyes narrowing at the blonde. Do I make myself clear? Naruto nodded frantically, without saying a single word he ran upstairs and into his small room. The looks of disappointment and anger he received by his family were now etched into his brain forever. He curled up in his messy bed, his tears staining the sheets as he sobbed silently. It wasn't fair, all he wanted was a family to love him. Naruto sniffled, grabbing the headband that Shisui gave to him and hugging it to his chest. Only Shisui nice and truly cared about him. He is the only family he had. He finally saw the reality, how sick he was to think that this was a family. The words of Natsu snapping gently into place. He would prove them wrong, he would get strong without their help. He opened his bloodshot eyes, pushing the headband upwards and wrapping it around his forehead. Pushing back his depression and changing it to determination. He will grow stronger, he has Shisui Nissan and the academy. He didn't need special treatment, he didn't need this so-called family. Using his arm he wiped away his remaining tears. I'll become strong. I swear. Water style. Water clone jutsu. Two identical clones made of pure water formed at Naruto's feet. All three held kunai as they sprinted off towards Shisui. The lone Uchiha grinned widely as he easily dispatched both clones with a soft kick to the chest. He sidestepped Naruto's attempt to kick his stomach, taking advantage of Naruto's new opening, grabbing the blonde's leg, throwing him over his back. Naruto wasted no time as he performed a quick Kawurimi appearing to Shisui's left side. The Uchiha bent his back backwards, sending a sweep kick under Naruto's leg, making the blonde fall to the floor. Shisui moved his body until he was atop Naruto, arm around his neck in a chokehold. The whole time his goofy grin never left his face as he watched the blonde struggle under his weight. That was better. You're differently improving, my little turtle. Naruto scowled, his face pressed up against the forest floor attempting to glare at his sensei. I said stop calling me that. Shisui only smiled as he pushed Naruto deeper into the ground. And honestly, Turtle-chan, a genjutsu on an Uchiha. I've taught you better than that. Naruto's body then sunk into the ground, turning into blades of grass, while Shisui used his signature jutsu, the Shunshin technique, or the body flicker. In a sudden flash he was about 10 feet away, his elbow extended out seemingly hitting air. Suddenly Naruto's body appeared from what looked like nowhere and flew across the training ground and impacted with the nearest tree. He spat out a small amount Sylvia, leaving a pretty decent-sized dent in the tree. Naruto gave an audible groan. His arm coming up to rub his chest, his ribs felt like crap. He looked up to see his sensei kneeling down at him. His arms resting on his knees as he grinned at Naruto. I'm proud that you managed to get that genjutsu down so fast. Naruto gave a silly grin. In the past year since the sudden falling out of his family, he had been spending more and more time with Shisui. The young Anbu managed to take some time off of his shinobi duties to help train Naruto, and while he was more experienced than the highest academy student, he was only slightly a genin level shinobi. It wasn't too bad. The only real issue was understanding how the jutsu worked. He spoke as he rubbed the back of his neck. A mannerism he picked up by hanging around with Shisui. A hidden person genjutsu, mainly used for assassination missions. It was a C-rank genjutsu that focused more on the fundamentals of genjutsu itself. It wasn't just how good your chakra control was, it was understanding how the cerebral nervous system works in order to manipulate your opponent's 5 major senses. Any shinobi could perform genjutsu, it was how precise your chakra control was to really make the illusion convincing. Shisui gave a nod of his head, watching Naruto get to his feet. He crossed his arms over his chest. So Naruto, how's the academy going? Have you learned anything yet? Naruto shrugged his shoulders, his eyes flashing suddenly with annoyance. It's been about a year now that Naruto was enrolled in the Shinobi Academy along with his siblings and all the clan heirs from the major clans in the village. And like usual, no one batted an eyelash in his direction. Even the teacher of his class was shocked when he read his name, apparently thinking there were only two Namikaze children. And speaking of the two Namikaze children. Last year, during the first real fight he had with his family and hitting Natsu right between the eyes with his jutsu. The next morning he was forced to apologize to his brother and sister. While Natsu got off scot-free, no punishment, no scolding. Just an imaginary slap on the wrist while Naruto was grounded for 2 weeks, with only a limited amount of food at his disposal. He wasn't allowed to go out to eat with them, not like they would have noticed anyway, or go shopping. I haven't learned anything at all. All we have been doing is stupid leaning exercises. Stuff we all already know about. Naruto huffed angrily as he crossed his arms over his chest, earning a laugh from Shisui. The Uchiha looked down at Naruto, a grin appearing on his face as he ruffled the blonde's hair. Naruto pouted up at Shisui. I know that the academy is super boring right now, but they do teach you the basics of being a shinobi. Naruto scoffed at that. Forcefully removing Shisui's hand from his hair, you already taught me the basics. Hell, more than half the class are from major clans in Konoha, who already know the basics. Naruto said, taking a seat on the floor, crossing his arms with a huff. Shisui shrugged his shoulders as he leaned against the tree next to the blonde. Looking at Naruto with a fond smile. Well, you still have a ways to go, Turtle-chan, it won't be easy getting all the way to the top. Naruto blushed deeply as he jumped to his feet, glaring at his sensei. Stop calling me that, damn it. Hey, it's not my fault I caught you playing with some turtles when I got here. Naruto huffed in annoyance as he tried to push down his growing blush. Shisui tried to fight back a laugh before giving in completely. After his laughter died down, he walked over to the blonde. He put one arm on his hip before letting out a deep sigh. Naruto looked up at his sensei and raised a confused eyebrow. That was strange, he had never seen Shisui do something like that before. Naruto started to feel uncomfortable at the sudden silence. He shifted in his seat before he opted to ask Shisui what he was doing. Before he could speak, Naruto jumped as Shisui suddenly snapped his fingers. That's it. What's it? Shisui chuckled as a large goofy grin spread across his face. Naruto suddenly felt a chill sneak its way to his spine. Whatever his sensei had come to realize would not be a pleasant one. So Naruto. Shisui said, gaining the blonde's attention. Naruto gulped, suddenly feeling sick to his stomach. He looked around, making sure no one else was here before kneeling down, and looked at Naruto deep in the eyes. If he noticed the sweat started to beat down Naruto's face, he didn't mention it. Shisui hummed as he flicked Naruto on the forehead, rather hard I may add. Naruto gave a cry of surprise, rubbing his now sore forehead before looking up and glaring at his sensei. His face beat red from embarrassment. Before he could yell at the older man, he saw a pretty good-sized scroll in his hands, thrusting it towards Naruto. Naruto had to lean back a bit to get a better look as it was a little too close. Naruto frowned in confusion as he grabbed the scroll from Shisui. Shisui Niacin, what is this? He said before placing the scroll on the floor and unraveling it. Shisui laughed before taking a seat across the blonde. Well, I've been trying to think about the perfect thing to finally boost your training into overdrive. And this, he said pointing at the scroll, is what I have come up with. He finished and Naruto nodded his head in excitement. Once he opened the scroll fully, he placed his hand on the little sealing array in front of him, channeling a small amount of chakra into it. A sudden poof went off and Naruto swung his hand in the arm, trying to rid the smoke that obscured his vision. After the smoke cleared, he finally was able to see what was inside. Naruto raised an eyebrow in confusion, looking between Shisui and the revealed items. I don't understand. They look like big magnets. Naruto deadpanned, making Shisui break out into a fit of laughter. Naruto frowned in confusion, he didn't know what was so funny. After Shisui regained his composure, he held up one of the magnets, as Naruto called them, and told the boy to stand up. Naruto did as he was told and Shisui went behind Naruto and began to tie the magnet around his legs. No baka, these are training weights. We're going to leave these on your body until you get accustomed to them. Naruto groaned as he felt his legs start to become heavy, he found it a lot harder to maintain his posture. He felt Shisui start to tie the remaining weight onto his arms now. I still don't get it. How is making me heavy training? He said as he slumped his arms down from the sudden weight. These weights will get your body used to them, and once you get used to them you will feel that your muscles and body will have grown stronger. And you will see that once you take them off after a while your body will feel as light as a feather, making it real easy to move, therefore making you faster. Naruto looked up dumbfounded. These simple weights did all that? That was incredible. Wow, that's amazing. So how long do I have to keep these on for? A few days? A month? 2 months? Shisui sweat dropped at the rapid-fire questions as he waved his hand in the air, a devious smirk forming on his face. Oh, you know, only forever. Till we have to raise the amount. Naruto felt his face fall. His excitement evaporated almost instantly as he looked out upwards, his innocent eyes wide open. A deafening silence fell in the clearing as Naruto digested the words that were fed to him. F forever. Likey ever. Shisui nodded his head, trying his best not to bust out laughing. Well, of course, Turtle-chan. You have to keep raising the amount and keep them on constantly to get used to them. So get used to sleeping with them. Naruto finally gave in and fell to the ground, but he wasn't sure if it was because of the new weights on his body or his broken morale. Shisui rubbed the back of his head in amusement, lightly tapping the blonde with his foot to gain his attention as he picked up the second scroll that was with the weights. While on the ground, Naruto turned his head as he saw the scroll get picked up. He didn't even notice there was another scroll. Shisui placed it next to Naruto. Make sure you read this scroll. It's a B-rank genjutsu that's pretty difficult to pull off. Now if you don't learn it by the time I come back from my mission, don't feel discouraged. He said. After knowing Naruto for the past year, he really started to understand the blonde on a deeper level. He knew that Naruto would likely start to feel insecure and tell himself he wasn't good enough if he didn't learn a jutsu quickly, especially if it was a B rank. Sure, it isn't the most difficult jutsu out there, it really was only a B rank since it used a good portion of chakra to cast it. But knowing Naruto, he would berate himself constantly for it. It is pretty complicated. So take your time with it, I'll only be gone for about 1 week. Naruto frowned as he picked himself off the ground, rather sluggish, still getting used to the large amount of weights on his body. He forgot that Shisui was supposed to leave on a mission today. Still, he was happy that he took time out of his busy day to come teach him a few things. But he would show Shisui that he could learn this jutsu with no problem. While he was more excited than usual since this would be his highest rated jutsu, it did send some nervousness into his system. But he would make sure to complete it, no, master it before he got back. Naruto grabbed the scroll and something finally dawned on him. Hey Shisui Niasen, where did you get this scroll? You suddenly just had it with you? Shisui raised an eyebrow at the blonde before shaking his head. No. When I figured it out what to get you, I quickly left and threw the scroll together from home. Naruto's eyes grew to the size of saucers, his mouth falling open in shock as he stared starry-eyed at his sensei. Wait, you left? But I didn't see you move. Naruto screamed and Shisui gave a hearty laugh. Come on kid, they don't call me Shisui of the body flicker just for fun. He said with a grin as he saluted his student and with his free hand pointed at the scroll in Naruto's hand, making the blonde avert his eyes. Now make sure to study. See you in a week. Wait Shis. Ooey. Naruto looked back up to see that he was already gone. Not a single trace of Shisui left in sight. Naruto looked in awe, not believing his sensei was capable of something so cool. This only seemed to push Naruto more into proving that he was a capable shinobi. So without wasting any more time, he jumped into a seating position and unraveled the scroll. Not wanting to let any motivation go to waste. Now let's learn this jutsu. God, this is impossible. Naruto yelled as he threw his body backwards onto the forest floor. Looking up into the beautiful blue sky as he threw his arms out as well, they hit the ground with a loud thud as he still wasn't used to his new weights. Naruto huffed as he glared up at the sky, his eyes picking one cloud out of the many masses and sending a chilling glare its way. This is all your fault. This is supposed to be an easy genjutsu to learn, why can't you just work with me? He screamed at the cloud. His anger started to get the better as he yelled empty threats at the large mass of water vapor. It has been 5 days since Shisui left on his mission and Naruto made basically zero progress on the jutsu. He clenched his fists in irritation, he managed to get the water clone jutsu down in 1 day. And the hidden person technique barely took him 2 days. He huffed in annoyance as he grabbed his hair in annoyance. Ga stupid ass genjutsu. He said before sitting up. He pouted as he read the scroll for what felt like the millionth time. Perfect rainfall. An illusion which changes the atmosphere into sudden acid rainfall that burns one's skin if touched. Must use a good amount of chakra in order to perform this technique, needing enough to trick the sense of one's body. After glazing over the scroll one last time, he crossed his legs and performed the necessary hand seals. He channeled his chakra through his body, feeling it seamlessly pass through his coils. With one last sudden pulse he broke the hand seal, his face scrunching in concentration. He slowly opened his eyes as he glanced to the sky. The sky was now a dark gray in color, dark clouds overtook the setting sun shadowing it from view. Then he felt something wet fall onto his arm. One by one more droplets started to fall from the sky, soaking him from the sudden torrent of rainfall. Ignoring the rain, he looked back upwards to the same cloud he screamed at earlier, his face getting drenched as he scowled deeply. Now you're just taunting me, you asshole. He picked up his scroll, raveling it back up before quickly making his way over to a small clearing he knew was near the training ground. It was some ways away, closer to training ground 13, but it would be the perfect spot to shelter himself from the rain for now. Pushing a bush out of his way, he stumbled into the clearing. There was a large open area with large trees outlining it. It had overtaken the area, growing high enough that the bark and leaves from the trees made it so rain could not fall onto this area. Only a small amount of light shone through the leaves, making the surroundings super dim. Naruto stopped his trek as he heard a kunai wince by, his eyes growing wide as he followed the sound only to see the weapon embed itself into a poorly made target on one of the trees. Looking back into the clearing, noticing a vague silhouette in the center. Letting his eyes adjust to the lighting, he was able to make out the Chunin uniform the person was wearing, along with a head of unkempt onyx hair. He saw her open her eyes, silently transfixed as bright ruby irises caught his attention. She abruptly jumped to her feet, kicking upwards. Her bright red pants captured his attention, not noticing her reach into the pouch on her waist and sending 3 more kunai into their designated targets. Jumping in the air with a flip, her legs extended out, smashing a target to pieces before spinning a kunai into her free hand. Using the blade, she stuck it into the ground, gripping the hilt and spun herself around, propelling herself back up into the air for extra momentum. Naruto watched in awe as he witnessed the woman train. He couldn't believe his eyes, he had never seen anything like this before. And before he knew, he had to shield his eyes as the clearing erupted brightly. A large fireball exploded into the clearing, lighting up the area. She sent another one in the sky, using the force to propel herself back down towards the ground. Naruto watched as she landed back onto the ground gracefully. Not a single flaw in her step or mistake in her posture. Naruto was starstruck at seeing first-hand fire manipulation. Shisui never used jutsu when they spared or showed off any of his skills other than taijutsu. So seeing real jutsu from somebody else was awesome. Before Naruto could expel his excitement, he felt something sharp go against his neck. He froze as he glanced down to see a kunai pressed up against his neck. Fear started to leak through him as he noticed the girl he was previously watching was now nowhere to be seen, and the scorch marks that were left behind from the fire jutsu also vanished. Trying to calm down his increasing heartbeat, he looked behind him to see the persisting red eyes of the girl he was just observing. He felt the kunai press deeper into his neck as panic spread. "Who are you and why are you watching me? You some sort of perv?" Naruto shook his head, sacred beyond belief and no. I was just passing T through WW when I saw you. I swear," he said frantically. The woman hummed in thought as she finally got a good look at the person she held captive. He was young, much younger than she would have thought from his presence. She sensed him the moment he got in the clearing and waited to see if he was gonna reveal himself or not. When he didn't, she decided to act first. After all, it's not the first time someone was spying on her. And he didn't seem like the pervy type, after all he looked like a normal academy student. She pushed down her shame at putting a kunai to the young kid's neck, and she would have sworn the kid looked a little familiar. She removed the blade from his neck and put it back safely in her pouch, making Naruto sigh in relief. He definitely will never tell Shisui-san about this. Naruto looked back at the girl, kicking his feet a little in embarrassment. "I'm sorry, miss. I was training and it started to rain, so I decided to come here. If I knew you were here I wouldn't have come," he said, embarrassed. Not being able to look the tall woman in the eye, she offered him a small smile, clearly amused by the kid's antics. But she did feel a little guilty. No, I should be the one apologizing. I overreacted quite a bit there." Naruto shook his head at her, putting on his biggest smile. "No, I understand, if someone was watching me, I would be freaked out too," he said, making the older woman laugh a bit. He put his hand out, extending it to the woman. Naruto Namikaze, it's good to meet you," he said happily. The woman widened her eyes a bit, so that's why the boy looked familiar. Taking in his features once again, the 7-year-old boy resembled his father greatly. The lighting in the clearing made it hard to distinguish all his features exactly. The woman offered a gentle smile before accepting his hand. "I'm Kurinai Yuhi. A pleasure to meet you, Naruto-kun." Naruto felt his cheeks start to burn from the affectionate suffix. He scratched the back of his head as she looked at the boy, amused, taking in his features one more time. "No wonder you're all soaked, I had no idea it was raining," she said before walking past the blonde and back into the wide open clearing. Naruto followed after her, watching as she performed several hand seals. Illumination factor. Right before Naruto's eyes, the whole clearing became clear as day. His eyes going wide as the trees above them opened up, revealing a bright blue cloudless sky. Naruto looked around amazed, not believing what Kurinai had just done. Kurinai turned back towards Naruto, looking into his shocked blue eyes with mirth. "How did you do that?" "It's a simple genjutsu, it's still raining in Konoha, so I just made it so it was clear sunny skies for us alone," she explained, and Naruto perked up at the mention of genjutsu. Practically jumping in place. "Wait, genjutsu? Are you good at genjutsu, Kurinai-san?" Kurinai nodded proudly. Her eyes took on a serious note. "Yes, in fact I'm striving to be the #1 genjutsu user in all of Konoha, it's what I specialize in," she said, and Naruto looked up at her in awe. The feeling of pride that Kurinai let wash over her body. She straightened herself as Naruto started to ramble about his own training of genjutsu. As he was talking, she couldn't help but wonder what the youngest child of the Yondaime would be out all alone out here training. Curiosity flashed within her mind as she focused her deep red eyes on the boy as he talked. His tone seemed happy, but she could easily recognize the underlying pain hidden in those endless ocean eyes of his. But regardless of the pain, they held such warmth that she had never seen before, especially not in someone so young. She watched as he brought one of his hands up to scratch the back of his head as he talked, noticing the tic that he had displayed in their earlier meeting. Kurinai smiled slightly at the gesture. The boy had a cute expression when he was flustered. She blinked, finally noticing the black scroll he had in his other hand. And I just can't get this genjutsu down, and I've been trying for the past 5 days. What kind of genjutsu is it? Naruto blinked, handing the scroll over to Kurinai. Kurinai gave a quick thanks before taking a seat on the floor, motioning Naruto to do the same. After opening the scroll, she read over the contents before raising an eyebrow in confusion. Naruto noticed her sudden look. Is everything okay, Kurinai-san? Kurinai nodded, without looking away from the scroll. Where did you get this jutsu, Naruto-kun? Naruto tilted his head at the question. Shisui Nyasan gave me this scroll before he left on his mission a few days ago. Kurinai hid her surprise at the mention of Shisui's name. How could she not know who he was? He was assigned as captain to one of her missions a few months ago, and he was one of the best shinobi she had worked with. He listened to the whole team and any ideas that they had, and even supported the team and was open to suggestions. Not to mention him being of Uchiha descent, he didn't act like one at all. Most Uchiha were arrogant and outright rude. Whenever she worked with another Uchiha, they scoffed at her for pursuing genjutsu, telling her it was useless to try and outbeat an Uchiha in genjutsu. Shisui was a polar opposite in every sense of the way. He was kind, humble, and when he was told of her dream, he was ecstatic, telling her he hopes to see her at the top one day. Sneaking a glance back over at the worried Namikaze next to her, how did Naruto and Shisui cross paths? Shisui was a pretty busy shinobi, but he seemed to spend enough time with Naruto for the boy to harbor an affectionate nickname for the man. It seems there was more to Naruto Namikaze than meets the eye. She turned the scroll back over to Naruto. What exactly were you having trouble with? Naruto slumped down and looked at the ground, embarrassed. I don't know. I'm using the right amount of chakra and the right hand seals. But when I try to cast the jutsu, it won't work. Kurinai nodded at his explanation. Standing up, she dusted her legs before asking Naruto to demonstrate and try to perform the technique. Naruto nodded hesitantly before going through the necessary hand seals, pulsing his chakra as Kurinai watched him under a critical eye. After a few moments of nothing happening, Naruto groaned in disappointment, looking down, letting his hair fall into his eyes. I don't get it, I'm doing everything I can. Kurinai softened her gaze at the boy, understanding flashing in her eyes. Genjutsu was indeed one of the hardest shinobi tactics to try and master, which is a main reason more people don't try and learn it after all. But she was pretty certain on why he wasn't able to complete it. I think I know what your problem is. Naruto snapped his head up to Kurinai. Really? What is it? Kurinai took a seat right across the blonde, crossing her legs and putting her hands in a meditative pose. Naruto raised an eyebrow but kept quiet. Genjutsu is essentially the control of one's cerebral nervous system by taking control of all 5 of their senses. We are altering their sensory ability to create false imagery that they believe is real. While in theory it makes sense, it is much more than that, she said, stopping for a moment to make sure that he was still paying attention. But what most people don't understand, that in order to appropriately make a genjutsu convincing is the one's understanding of themselves. What do you mean? Insecurities plague all of our minds on the daily. It wells deep in our minds, refusing to leave, fermenting into depression and fear. By understanding these problems and coming to terms with who you are as a person, as a shinobi, letting go and accepting will allow your mind to open up clearly. Now Naruto, what is plaguing your mind? Naruto let his eyes go downcast, letting his pain surface up in a moment of vulnerability, refusing to look back up as he tried to gather a single coherent thought that racked his brain. I guess it's that I don't feel like I'm good enough for my family. They always ignore me or are mean to me. Natsu and Narumi get everything they want and I get nothing. The only training I have is from Shisui Nissan since they refuse to train me. Kurinai fought back the urge to gasp as Naruto continued to talk, not believing what she was hearing. Her views on the yondaime changed by the second as she looked at the boy with newfound sadness, her own eyes falling downcast. It's always the same excuse, since Natsu and Narumi are Jinchuriki, they need the extra training and early lessons. They even forget me on my birthday. He trailed off, his voice sound no louder than a whisper. Shocking Kurinai, he raised his head up to look at her, offering her a smile. A smile that was way too bittersweet for her liking. But I'm happy. I have Shisui Nissan, and now I have you, Kurinai-san, he said, his eyes closing, hiding his tears as his smile grew. Kurinai pushed her own tears back, looking at the person she couldn't believe was only 7 years old. She returned the smile, although a bit forced. Try and let go of your fears, Naruto-kun. I know it will be hard and there is no rush, so take it at your own pace. Then Genjutsu will be there for you." Naruto wiped the remaining tears away from his eyes as he looked at Kurinai once more. He nodded his head. She couldn't help but let a single tear fall down her cheek. Reaching her hand out to affectionately rub the tears away from his face. "Thank you, Kurinai-san." Naruto was pleased to see that his training was coming together rather nicely. His body was 10x stronger than it was last year, and he could easily say he was almost a genin level shinobi before graduating. Though it's been 2 years since he started training with Shisui, he could feel that he was improving. And after his fateful meeting with Kurinai in the forest all those months ago, he was able to finally complete the Genjutsu with her help before parting ways. Kurinai has been more and more busy as time went on, since she was currently undergoing heavy training herself for the Jounin exams. Not able to dedicate her time to anything else. Naruto had also increased the weights on his body about 20 pounds. His body started to get accustomed to them, which he concealed under his clothes. When he wasn't training with Shisui, he would usually return to the forest for extra muscle training and ninjutsu. From 9 am to 12 pm he would run laps around Konoha. From 12:30 pm to 5 pm he would practice whichever jutsu Shisui had given him. Then 5:30 pm to 10 pm would be spent with physical training till his body collapsed. It was an effective schedule since he had only 2 days a week for himself. Shisui occupied his time Monday through Friday. So Saturday and Sunday were his only days to himself. Still, he wasn't completely happy at his training progress, as he would have liked to master the techniques he had learned. His goal was to master a technique until he could perform a jutsu without weaving hand seals. So far he was only able to the basic Academy 3 jutsu without hand seals. The Bushin, Kawarimi, and the Henge, since they were only E-rank, they were pretty easy to master. His Genjutsu was improving at a rapid rate. After he opened up to Kurinai at the forest, he felt like a burden had been lifted off his shoulders. He felt more free, not held back anymore. His anger and sadness for his family, while still there, was a lot less than it was before. Going home still hurt a lot since he had to see and hear the progress that his brother and sister were making while he went to his room unnoticed. He still wasn't sure if he would say he had come to terms with his family's neglect, but having some people who truly cared for him, it made it much easier. It was nice waking up knowing that there were people who are there for you. "I'm always shocked by how much you can eat, Naruto," Shisui said as he placed his head in his hands watching Naruto inhale his 9th bowl of ramen with a mixture of pride and disgust. He looked down at his own empty bowl, silently wondering if he could eat just as much as Naruto. "IDNTHKNTH youth can't." Shisui scoffed at Naruto before flicking his favorite blonde on the forehead with a chuckle. "Swallow before you talk, baka." Naruto nodded before swallowing the remaining food in his mouth, letting out a satisfying sigh as he did so. Patting his stomach happily, "Thanks for the ramen, niacin. That really hit the spot." Shisui nodded his head before ruffling Naruto's hair with a smile. Naruto didn't have the energy to stop the older man, instead he leaned into the touch with a grin of his own. "Don't thank me, thank Tucci-san here for making the best ramen in Konoha," he said, pointing a thumb over to the elderly gentleman behind the counter as he placed another steaming bowl on miso ramen in front of Naruto. The blonde's eyes lit up as the now identified Tucci gave a hearty laugh. "Not just the best ramen in Konoha, the best ramen in the entire elemental nations." "Amen," Naruto yelled, making the three of them burst out laughing, the mood in the store practically glowing with positive energy, like it usually did when Naruto and Shisui stopped for a late lunch or even dinner. After the laughter died down, Shisui turned his attention back to Tucci. "So Tucci-san, where's AM-san? Finally decided not to work her to the bone," he said with a sly smirk, making the elder wave his hand in defense with a laugh. "She's the one who insisted on working here after all, not me. But I gave her the week off since she's been working so damn much," he said, making Shisui nod, glad to hear that she was okay. Tucci snuck a glance back over at Naruto before offering Shisui a look of pity. "Hey, I know about Naruto-kun's insane eating habits, how about only paying for the first few bowls? The rest would be on the house." Shisui gave the man a compassionate smile before shaking his head, refusing the offer. "Sorry, but no can do, Tucci-san. I got paid pretty well for my last mission and it's the least I can do for the kid," he said, making Teki hesitantly nod, hoping the Uchiha wasn't going broke over the blonde boy. Shisui turned his attention back over to Naruto, his smile slowly falling off his face as his look turned melancholic. "Is this all I can do for you, Naruto-kun?" he thought to himself as he continued to watch the blonde devour his bowl. His mind traveled back to only a few hours ago, before he met up with Naruto. Flashback. "But Fugaku-sama. My decision is final, Shisui." The voice belonged to none other than Fugaku Uchiha, the current clan head of the Uchiha clan. The one person that Shisui hated more than anything right now. Shisui clenched his hands, his Sharingan active and spinning widely. Shisui, you are one of the most gifted Uchiha the clan has ever produced. You shouldn't be wasting your time and potential on this village. Fugaku spoke, his voice laced with venom. The mere thought of Konoha causing his blood to boil. You should be proud, knowing full well that the Uchiha name will soon be restored to its former glory. Fugaku said before walking in front of Shisui and placing a hand onto the younger boy's shoulder. Shisui had to fight back the reaction to snarl at the elder. Fugaku forced eye contact, his own Sharingan spinning in his socket. This is a wonderful opportunity for the clan Shisui. We will get back what was rightfully ours. He spoke, his voice darker than ever. His very breath stunk of malice. Shisui shook his head at the clan head, and a coup d'etat against the village is the way to do tha. The loud smack echoed within the room. Shisui's eyes went blank as Fugaku sneered to his underling. His arm outstretched as his palm connected to Shisui's cheek, wiping it across his face. Don't you dare talk back to me, boy. Know your place within these chamber walls and do as told. You're dismissed, he said, feeling no remorse for what he has done. Shisui schooled his emotions, putting up a stoic expression as he turned his back to Fugaku, turning his head to meet the elder one last time in the eye. It's you guys that have destroyed the Uchiha name. Not Konoha. Then if I may ask Fugaku-sama, when is the coup d'etat taking place? Fugaku smiled, happy to hear that Shisui had finally started to see reason. Not that he had much of a choice in the matter, the whole clan was already preparing for the takeover. In 2 days' time. At midnight. He said, taking a seat, balling his hand into a fist and resting his head, narrowing his eyes. Do I make myself clear, Shisui? Crystal, Fugaku-sama. This is quite an honor, Shisui. Remember where your allegiance lies. Then flashback. Shisui clenched his fists tightly just thinking about Fugaku. Scowling as he looked down at the ground, hoping his sudden attitude change went unnoticed by Naruto. Almost every day he had tried to talk reason on Fugaku, then they didn't need to do a coup d'etat. But there were so many more possibilities that would be better. But he didn't listen, he never listened to reason. He kept saying it was in the best interest for the clan. That they needed to do this in order to be on top like they deserved. For years now the Uchiha clan was on thin ice with the Konoha Council. They were the prime suspects of the Kyuubi no Kitsune's sudden appearance in the center of Konoha all those years ago. Being stated that multiple cases have been showing up giving evidence that the Kyuubi did in fact show signs of the Sharingan, potentially showing the use of an ocular genjutsu while attacking. The Uchiha was forced to give up 35% of all their clan compounds, as well as the official closing of the Uchiha military police. Not only that, but they were now getting taxed heavily, about 9% more than the Hyuga clan. Well, Shisui did feel targeted since he was a holder of the Uchiha name. He was slightly appreciative that the clan was starting to get put in check. They have become too arrogant and self-centered. The once beloved clan was slowly losing its respectable name. Shisui gave a small sigh. Leaning his head upwards, the clan was now in the midst of planning a coup d'etat to overthrow Konoha no Sato in 2 days. He hoped he would wake up and this would all be just a crazy fever dream. But he still had one plan up his sleeve. Hey Naruto. Naruto looked up to his niacin and tilted his head, ramen noodles hanging from his mouth with his chin covered in broth. Despite the internal battle Shisui was forced to fight in, he couldn't help but smile at his student. He couldn't help it. Standing up from his seat, he threw a hefty amount of bills on the counter, enough to cover the entire bill, plus some more, thanking Tucci for the meal. Come with me. Naruto wiped his face until it was ramen-free as Shisui walked out of the stand. The blonde placed his half-empty ramen door on the counter and quickly left to catch up to his sensei. Naruto was starting to get more and more nervous the longer they walked in silence. In the past 2 years Naruto had never seen Shisui look so serious. It was starting to worry Naruto greatly, but he opted to stay silent until they reached wherever they were going. If it was as serious as it seemed, then he really didn't want to make things worse. Shisui glanced back over at Naruto as they finally reached their destination at Training Ground 7. Walking over to a group of trees, Shisui leaned on the tree as Naruto did the same. The black-haired man looked up into the darkening sky, letting the soft spring breeze wash over his body. One of his hands was in his pouch and was fidgeting with a large black scroll nervously. Looking back at Naruto, he noticed that he looked ready to burst like an anxiety balloon any moment. He grinned slightly as he kneeled down to the boy's level as he ran his hand through the blonde's locks. Naruto started to calm down at the touch as he looked at Shisui, blinking in confusion. You know, Naruto-kun, I'm really glad I met you all those years ago. Naruto brightened up at his niacin's words, a light pink tinging his cheeks as he nodded enthusiastically to Shisui. Me too, niacin. I don't know what I would do without you. Shisui smiled at the boy, but on the inside he felt like screaming. He wanted nothing in this moment than to be able to tell Naruto that everything was going to be okay, that if he could he would stop this all and make the world a safer place. But he couldn't do anything. He was hoping, praying that his plan would work, it had to. If not for his sake, then for Naruto's. With a shaky hand he gripped a scroll in his pouch and handed it to Naruto. The boy grabbed it and before he could ask what it was Shisui beat him to it. Naruto-kun, he started, making sure he had the boy's full attention before continuing. I want you to promise me something. Naruto quickly snapped to attention. Shisui's voice took a serious edge as his eyes morphed into his Sharingan, looking Naruto deep in the eyes. Naruto gulped before hesitantly nodding his head. Anything Shisui-san. Shisui put his hands over Naruto's as they grabbed a scroll together. Naruto felt Shisui's hands tighten around him, almost desperately. Promise me. Promise me you will only open this scroll if anything bad happens to me. Naruto felt his eyes go wide, stunned at what his Nai-san just said. A look of fear etching across his face. His mind running at a mile a minute trying to process if he heard him correctly. He looked at Shisui, his eyes starting to become glossy. Shisui-san, what's going on, are you in danger? Shisui kept his serious gaze up but his eyes flashed with uneasiness. His Sharingan spinning widely as he pushed the scroll into the boy's chest. No, of course I'm not in danger. He shook his head, looking Naruto dead in the eye. Just promise me. Naruto slowly nodded his head, the grip on the scroll now tightening considerably. As he tried his best not to let the tears fall from his eyes. I promise. Shisui's power over the Shunshin no Jutsu was pure masterful. Mastered to the point where even a Jounin would think the man just vanished completely. After his little talk with Naruto he had dropped the boy back at his house before using his Shinshin and traveling at almost impossible speed, appearing just outside the Uchiha compound in a small forest area, leaning on the border to the forest of death. A scowl formed on his face as he unsheathed his sword and with a loud scream, he sliced the neatest tree nearly in half. He breathed heavily as he looked up in the dark sky. The clan was really going through with it, he observed the clan for weeks. He spied on them and tried his best to stop the elders and their coup d'etat. While he knew the Uchiha were cursed with the obsession of power, the cycle of hatred burned stronger in the Uchiha, more so than ever since Madara. Though Shisui harbored no love for the Uchiha since their turn of utter hatred consumed them. It was still his family, a family he was born into, raised into and taught. But this last year, the word family left a bitter taste in his mouth. The family. Witnessing firsthand what has happened to Naruto, seeing the downfall of the Uchiha clan with his own two eyes. It wasn't the blood that connected you as family. No, it was the people you care about, the people you swore to protect. The Uchiha weren't his family, the Hokage weren't his family, he only had himself and Naruto. Suddenly the breaking of a twig echoed through the small clearing. Shisui acted quickly, grabbing his sword as an old man walked out of a bush. The man was old, his hair still full on black as he wore an oversized white shirt with a green cape covering the right side of his body. He had bandages covering his right eye and an X scar on his chin. He looked over at Shisui. The Uchiha glaring over at him. Danzo. What are you doing here? The now identified Danzo said nothing, he continued his walk until they were about 20 feet apart. The elder, having his eyes closed, fully aware he was facing off against an Uchiha, especially Shisui. Danzo gave out a soft hum before shaking his head slowly. It seems you have failed to negotiate with Fugaku-sama about stopping the coup d'etat. Am I correct? Shisui scowled as he tightened his grip around his sword, clicking his tongue in irritation. No. I have one more day and I have a plan to stop this. Danzo hummed to himself as he scratched his chin, his voice eerily calm as he spoke. The mission was quite simple, Shisui-san. You were the key to stopping the coup d'etat. Danzo said, taking a moment to collect his thoughts. After a moment he gave a soft sigh of disappointment. Now sadly I have been forced to play my hands into this mess that you Uchiha have caused. Shisui narrowed his eyes at the elder. You said you would let me handle it. He said, giving Danzo a dirty look. You promised. I only promised to leave that Namikaze you are so fond of alone. I merely held a safety precaution if you failed. Shisui glared over at Danzo, wanting to wipe that calm look right off his face. Danzo had always been an enigma to him. Not much was known about the old warhawk. Only he was one of the Sandaime Hokage's teammates and lost the title of Hokage twice. Having a supposed disbanded Anbu squad that called themselves Root. Rumors were that they worked under the Hokage, but their true loyalty lies with Danzo. Kodamatsukami. Indeed a powerful genjutsu. Danzo spoke, Shisui widened his eyes in shock. How do you? Without warning Danzo was in front of Shisui, a kunai lodged in his side. Shisui was left in shock and had no time to react to the bandaged hand coming up to his face. Shishu let out a scream of agony as he fell to the ground, his hand around his now empty left eye socket. Blood leaking down his face as he looked up to see the imposing figure of Danzo. The look of utter shock on Shisui's face as he watched the man pull the bandages off his face. Showing a 3-tomo Sharingan. Holding his stolen eye in his hand before watching it get sealed away into a seal on his arm. You monster. He yelled, removing the kunai from his side, not feeling the pain from the sudden adrenaline rush that kicked in. He threw the kunai over at Danzo, forcing him to dodge. Shisui wasted no time performing his shunshin appearing behind Danzo, sending a swift kick to the elder's ribsage. Danzo smiled wickedly, his new Sharingan seeing the kick and intercepting it with his own arm. Forming one-handed hand seals he sucked in a bunch of air wind style. Great breakthrough. Shisui performed another shunshin dodging the jutsu. Danzo turned around just in time to duck under Shisui's sword. Shisui, expecting Danzo to dodge, swung his sword into the ground. Pushing off the hilt, increasing his speed and sending a swift kick into Danzo's stomach, sending him flying into a large oak tree. Grabbing the hilt of his sword, Shisui pulled it out of the ground and after another quick shunshin rushed after Danzo. Danzo snorted at Shisui, flipping a kunai over his hand, squeezing the handle of his kunai he swung backwards. With a loud clang, Shisui's sword was blocked by Danzo's own blade. Shisui gritted his teeth at the man, applying more pressure to his sword. Danzo sneered, trying his best to hold Shisui back from the sudden pressure. "You bastard. This is the last time I let you order people around. I'll make sure you die by my hand today, you damn thief." Danzo let out a loud shriek of laughter, his stolen Sharingan spinning like crazy, his eyes open wide with sudden glee. "You are a fool. You would think I would just come and attack you for no reason." Shisui gritted his teeth in disgust of the man, suddenly knocking the kunai out of his hand and bringing the sword down, slicing Danzo's right arm. Danzo gave no indication of being hurt, only a huge smile, his bandaged hand coming up and grabbing the sword by the blade. Shisui looked over at Danzo in shock. "This guy is fucking crazy. You still think you are the only one I gave a mission to Baka? Your whole talk with Fugaku, with so many guards around. I knew you would have failed, that's why right now," he said, forcing the blade out of his arm. No blood leaked from his hand as Shisui widened his now lone Sharingan eye in anger. Appalled by Danzo's sudden hysteria, Danzo motioned Shisui to look up, only to see a large pillar of smoke coming from the Uchiha compound. Shisui almost lost the grip on his sword, a sudden burst of shock entering his veins as Danzo released a displeasing cackle of laughter. Danzo nimbly ducked under the boy's arm before jumping across the clearing. His hand coming up to hide his face, only showing the shape of his Sharingan. Mission details: Uchiha Itachi, slaughter the Uchiha clan starting at 11 p.m. No survivors. Effectively stopping the coup d'etat. His laughing getting louder and louder until it was borderline maniacal. Shisui felt his anger grow into pure deep animosity, his fists going tight as he looked over at Danzo in utter hatred. Shisui charged, both unaware of the thumping of footsteps running their way. Danzo smiled, his cracked expression wide with glee as he aimed a kunai at the Uchiha's heart. "I'll fucking kill you. Shisui Niasen." Shisui suddenly faltered, his sudden anger turning into fear as he watched a familiar blonde boy race over to him. Shisui suddenly lost his footing, the pain that he got inflicted on him at the beginning now started to resurface. He tumbled forward, watching the kunai come down at him. As Naruto finally reached him. "Niacin." All there that was seen was blood. Naruto fell to the ground, a loud death-screeching scream came from the boy's mouth as he held both hands up to his face. His body pulsating rapidly. Blood leaked down Naruto's hands as he gave a loud cry of pain. Shisui raced over to the down blonde, grabbing his shoulders as a few tears leaked from the Uchiha's lone eye. "Naruto? Naruto, are you okay?" Naruto couldn't even shake his head, the pain was excruciating, his eye was on fire. The blonde's tears mixing with blood making it burn even more. "It hurt so much." Naruto cried. "Niacin, please make it stop. Please. Please." Naruto begged helplessly. Shisui felt his heart shatter, all thoughts about the Uchiha gone from his mind. Now only occupied with Naruto's safety. Shisui gently grabbed Naruto's hands and slowly moved them away from his face. Naruto whimpered in pain as the cold air blew into his newly formed wound. He gave out a sudden cry, Shisui went pale, a small piece of Naruto's left eye rolled from underneath his hand and across the grass. A sliver of his blue iris mixed with his blood, stared right back at Shisui. Shisui felt sick to his stomach, he softly rested Naruto's head against his chest, making sure not to irritate the wound even more. Shisui heard the soft footsteps behind him and turned his head to see Danzo looking at him. The bandages back over his face covering his right side once again. All previous signs of insanity now gone from his facial expressions, now replaced with the diplomatic elder everyone knew. He stayed silent for a moment, kunai still drawn as he walked over until he was behind him. The cold steel resting across the warm neck of Shisui. The Uchiha shut his lone eye, the cries of Naruto echoing throughout the clearing as he clenched Shisui's blood-soaked shirt. If it's any consolation. There was no other way this could have gone, Shisui-san. Shisui shook his head sadly, his free hands softly caressing Naruto's blonde hair. "You are wrong, Danzo. There's always another way. You just weren't willing to find it." Danzo shut his eyes, shaking his head at the man's unwillingness to understand. "As promised. I will leave the Namikaze child alone. Shisui gave a thankful smile. His lone eye turning upside into a U shape. He gave a soft sigh, awaiting death, ready for its cold touch. But death never came. Suddenly the cold steel left his neck as a loud smack was heard as Danzo was suddenly gone. An array of trees now tumbling down with a trail of dust going deeper into the forest. Shisui looked upwards, only to see a sudden masked figure. He wore a long solid dark blue trench coat with a wave on the front. His mask was a soft pink, only showing a head of straight brown hair. The cloaked man tilted his head at the two people on the floor. He looked around. Traces of blood were everywhere. Trees were destroyed, and signs of jutsu were most definitely used. The masked figure bent down until he was eye level with Shisui. The Uchiha looked on in worry for Naruto. He tightened his grip around Naruto, making him whimper again. An action that didn't go unnoticed by the stranger. What happened to the little one here? His voice was surprisingly soft, coming off more feminine. Shisui looked down at Naruto in sadness. He jumped in front of a kunai for me. It completely destroyed his eye. He spoke, letting out a sudden cough in pain. The masked man nodded. He looked back at the young child. He was unconscious, no doubt collapsing from the sudden pain. He pushed his mask to the side, showing a lovely shade of pastel pink eyes catching Shisui's attention. It seems you care very much for this Namikaze child. Shisui stiffened but was held back by the masked man waving his hand. Don't worry, it doesn't matter to me where he came from. The man spoke silently, putting Shisui at ease. The Uchiha let out another cough as the pink-eyed man reached into his pouch, pulling out a small-sized urn. He placed it on the floor and looked back at the Uchiha. He motioned for Shisui to lay the boy down. After a few moments of Shisui not complying, the man sighed. I'm merely gonna heal him as best I can. Shisui reluctantly agreed, laying Naruto flat on his back. The masked man lifted the boy's shirt up, slowly grabbing some ink and writing on Naruto's stomach. Shisui questioned the man in between coughs about the man's method, and he looked at him. It's a seal array. Shisui raised an eyebrow, but stayed silent. The man grabbed the urn and motioned Shisui to put his hands out and grab on. The man whispered to Shisui, making his eye go wide. His lone onyx eye looking at the man in utter shock. But how do you? It's the group I am in. Adarash Plus. A group formed to fight back against the Akatsuki. That is why. He said, pointing at the urn now resting in Shisui's hand. I have that. Shisui silently nodded his head, not quite understanding the whole situation. He looked back at the prone figure of Naruto. His left eye entirely gone as the blood finally dried around his eye socket. His body felt weak. He knew he wouldn't survive this. He already lost more blood than he should have. Only staying alive for Naruto's sake. Even so, he felt a content smile on his face. He pulled his free hand upwards and around his remaining eye. The masked man watched in silent surprise. With a sudden grunt and a wet crunching noise, Shisui held out his now closed palm to the cloaked man. The small smile never leaving his face. If you wouldn't mind, please replace his eye with mine. It will be my last gift to him. The man stared at the Uchiha. He's never met an Uchiha that would willingly give his Sharingan to someone. He gave a hum and thought, coming to Konoha was a good idea after all. Of course. Shisui offered another kind smile and gave the man a soft thank you. Taking the eye from Shisui's palm and opening the urn and placing it on Naruto's stomach. He watched the Uchiha fall to the side, his body now resting directly next to Naruto's. The eyeless man reached his arm out, feeling the soft locks of blonde hair he caressed many times before. I guess neither of us would have ever thought this would ever happen, huh? He said, chuckling to himself. His smile growing wider. I love you, Turtle-chan. You were the baby brother I always wanted. Shisui said, a laugh escaping his mouth. Make sure you train hard, always eat your vegetables even if you don't like them. He spoke, his voice getting quieter. Please live your life the way you wanted, make friends, be happy with who you are. He said, his smile growing wider as he felt his life start to fade. There was so much more I wanted to teach you, Naruto. If only I wasn't weak, I would still be here, able to protect you. He said, as imaginary tears cascaded down his eye sockets. He gave a sudden chuckle, his grip trying its best to grab as much of his blonde hair as he could. His eyes shut and his head rolled back. Heh. Maybe you're not my little brother, but the son I always dreamed of having. And with that, Shisui Uchiha breathed his very last breath. Entering the eternal silence with a smile on his face, the masked man closed his eyes, mourning for the sudden shinobi that had just passed away. Very few shinobi were like him. The cloaked figure sighed, glad to see the man die with at least a smile on his face. Looking back down at the blonde, he would make sure this boy would live. Weaving through hand heels, he smacked his open palm on Naruto's bare chest and won over the blonde's destroyed eye. Secret sealing art. Conceal. Suddenly a bright blue light flashed across the area, blinding anyone in a near mile vicinity as Naruto's body hunched upwards and a loud scream tore through his throat. This lasted for what seemed like years for Naruto, but was merely just 5 minutes. As fast as it came it seemingly vanished. The ceiling arrays were now completely gone from Naruto's stomach. The cloaked man returned his mask to cover the rest of his face and wiped a bead of sweat off his brow. He looked back at the boy, the urn lying empty on the grass. The masked man gave a sigh as he walked over to the new deceased Uchiha. After a quick-fire jutsu, the body of Uchiha Shisui was no more. The masked man respected that particular Uchiha, he would make sure his body didn't get tampered with in death. Suddenly 3 chakra signatures alerted the masked man, with a quick shunshin he left the area almost instantly. As 3 Konoha shinobi came down only to find Naruto's body lying across what seemed like a battlefield. You damned baka. Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you not understand how utterly stupid this was? The familiar masked man let out a bored sigh. His pink mask was hanging at his side as his pastel eyes closed in annoyance. His hair now light gray color, while his eyes stayed the same pink. He moved his hand to his head, shaking his hair and making it messy. Yeah, I know what I did. I'm the one that did it after all. He spoke, the last part coming off as a whisper. You don't have to worry, Akira. I know exactly what I'm doing. Akira scoffed loudly and looked over at the cloaked figure. Her amber eyes looked over at him in anger. I don't care if you know what you're doing, you know. You just went ahead and gave this child our most prized possession. The one thing stopping Akatsuki. She barked at him. Small beads of spit landing on his face as he remained stoic. The now dubbed Yuno gave a shrug, the intention of Adarash Plus was on my mind. Now the urn is out of our possession, Akatsuki doesn't know where it is and cannot target us. But you can't just go around and seal. The shinobi world will benefit from my decision. I couldn't have asked for anyone better. Yuno spoke, cutting her off harshly, but his voice remained smooth. He turned around until his back was facing Akira. If looks could kill, Yuno would be a pile of ash right about now. You seem to trust this Namikaze Naruto, a mere child. She narrowed her eyes at the back of Yuno's head. Was there anything you left out of the report, Yuno? Her tone was dark, but Yuno was unaffected. He raised his hand over his head, giving a small wave as a grin played across his lips. Of course not, Leader-sama. Konoha. Konoha no Sato. The most powerful hidden village in all the elemental nations. Known for its famous shinobi and great economical advances. Harboring some of the strongest clans and bloodline limits that other countries only dreamed of having. But sadly, the village of Konoha had suffered a large blow to her power. Uchiha Itachi, one of the most gifted shinobi that Konoha has ever produced. Graduating the academy at the age of 7 and becoming a full-time Anbu captain at 13. Last week the Uchiha prodigy seemingly snapped in one night, slaying his whole clan in cold blood. From men, women, and any child he could find. The only known survivor of the massacre was Uchiha Sasuke, Itachi's very own little brother. No one knows the exact reason why Itachi did what he did, but the news spread all around the village like wildfire. It was likely that the surrounding counties had also caught wind of the tragedy that had taken place. Minato Namikaze, the Yondaime Hokage of Konoha, had never hated his job more than this past week. The people demanded answers, every council meeting was getting more and more stressful as they tried to calm down the public. Not only that, but since the fall of the Uchiha, the Hyuga clan had become more arrogant in their attempt to be named the strongest clan. Minato let out a much-needed groan, his hair was even more messy, making his spikes more unruly than ever. His Hokage cape was wrinkled and misshapen. There were large bags under his eyes, showing signs that he was sleep-deprived. He held his head in his hands, closing his eyes just to get a little rest. Sadly for him, it only kept getting worse. His son Naruto has been hospitalized since the beginning of the week. He was found close to 2 miles away from the Uchiha compound. Next to a burning body that they couldn't identify, traces of wind and fire jutsu were used all around the area. He clenched his fists in irritation, he had no idea why his son was over at the Uchiha compound or how he even got there in the first place. When they found Naruto, he had no damage to his body. Only a large vertical scar over his left eye. It pained Minato to see a scar on his youngest son's body. A sudden pang of guilt rising in him. How could Naruto defend himself if they haven't offered to train him? If Naruto only got away with a scar with no training, then maybe next time. Suddenly an Anbu appeared in the middle of his office, letting his train of thought suddenly break. Okage-sama, your son has finally woken up, but something is terribly wrong. Minato was suddenly gone from his office, the only trace left was a bright flash of yellow. Hospital room with Naruto. It was dark, so dark that even your shadow had to hide away in fear. Naruto looked around himself in utter confusion, looking down he saw his feet were submerged in about 4 inches of water. Naruto let his eyes wander the sudden abyss. There were no signs of life, no walls, just a large empty cavern. The only sound was a small dripping of water drops, one after another, falling down rhythmically, giving an odd relaxing feeling to a tenebrous room. Naruto felt the cold air walk itself over his body as he stepped forward, making him shiver. Each step making the smooth murky water glide across his feet and echo into the chasm. And that's when he saw it, like a thick curtain of darkness that played at a theater. Like the beginning of a play, it opened up, finally shining in a muted array of light. Then a large gust of wind picked up, forcing Naruto to cover his face as his shirt fluttered from the sudden gust. A strange heavy pressure fell onto his body, forcing his knees to buckle. His legs wobbling as his eyes went wide in horror. A lone regal eye stared back at him, like yellow mixed with silver. A proud coin of glory looking at him with an immense amount of pressure. And before he knew it, he was sent flying backwards, a yell passing his lips as the pitch-black abyss swallowed him whole. Naruto awoke from his hospital bed in a rush. A loud scream forcing itself up his throat and echoing in the white room. All occupants were startled in the room and rushed to his side immediately. Naruto didn't notice they were there, all he saw was red. Sudden flashbacks of what happened racing to his mind. All he saw was Shisui fighting a mysterious man he's never seen before. Them jumping in the way and… Naruto's head suddenly started to throb, his left eye burning. The feeling that it was on fire spreading through his body as the phantom pain of that night returning. He thrashed in his hospital bed, his gown riding down his body as the nurses tried to calm the seemingly hysterical boy down. Suddenly a flash of bright yellow came from the room as the Yondaime Hokage came in to see his son in shambles. His mind went into overdrive and he raced to his son, grabbing the boy's thrashing head in his hands. "Naruto, what's wrong? Get away from me. Where's Shisui Niasen? Where is he?" Naruto yelled, cutting off Minato mid-sentence. His smaller hands gripping Minato's sleeve trying to pull him away. Minato flinched in surprise at his son's outburst. Naruto clenched his hands around Minato's sleeve, grabbing the Hokage's attention as Naruto finally stopped moving. A soft sob escaped his lips as he looked down at his messed up hospital bed. Naruto forcefully removed his father's hands from his head, letting his free hand to once again move over his left eye. This time he finally felt what was there, he traced over his eye socket as if it was his first time. He felt soft bumps going up his eye as he got a glimpse of himself in the far mirror of the room. It was a long vertical scar going up his eye resting just below his forehead. But what shocked him most was the eye that was in his head, he swore he felt it leave his socket. He suddenly grew very pale, the phantom pain now burning his very core. The memories freshly implanted in his brain forever. Naruto looked over to his father, a loom of worry stretched across the man's face as he waited for Naruto to speak. Naruto gave a small sniffle. "Where is Shisui Nisan?" Minato, slightly curious as to why this certain Uchiha was apparently close to his son. He internally frowned at that thought, the more he thought about it, the less answers he would receive. Both Namikazes were ignorant to the black narrowed eyes looking in their direction from across the room. Naruto, last week the whole Uchiha clan was killed by one of their own. There was only one survivor. Naruto looked at his dad in utter disbelief. The whole clan slaughtered. One survivor. He had a vague memory of Shisui laying down next to him, his mouth moving, but he heard no words. The sudden realization dawned on the boy. Shisui was dead, the only person that cared for him. The only person that treated him with the respect he always wanted. The first person to openly tell him that he loves him. Minato bent down to his son, his hand coming to rub Naruto's head. "It's okay, Naruto. Everything will get better from here on out. You still have us." Before Minato could touch his head, Naruto smacked his hand away. His bloodshot eyes glaring at Minato with newfound fury. "Us? When has there ever been an us?" he screamed, taking the nurses by surprise at his sudden outburst. "I don't fucking care about us. All I wanted was to stay with Shisui Niasen." Minato felt his spine stiffen in shock at Naruto's sudden rage. While some part of him knew he deserved this, the more irrational side of him started to get the better of him. He put on what he dubbed his dad face and locked eyes with his son. "You do not raise your voice at me, young man. I'm still your father and you will show me some respect. Or else." "Or else what? You're gonna ground me again? Send me to my room without any dinner? Making me apologize for something that Natsu and Narumi did? Or even take away the training you haven't even given me?" Minato fell silent at his son's words, a sudden spike of anxiety running through his body as his veins turned to ice. Sadly, Minato couldn't find any fault in Naruto's statement. He tried to rack his brain around for anything that he has done for Naruto, trying to find anything to convince his son that it wasn't true. Naruto looked over at his father in anger, having to bite his cheek from screaming again. All the grief and sadness that he had stored up into his small body was now leaking out in waves. Without waiting for a response, Naruto jumped off his bed and ran out the hospital door in a rush. Needing to get away. Minato made his way to go after him. But one step in, one of the nurses grabbed his shoulder, stopping him. "I wouldn't do that right now, Hokage-sama. He's having post-traumatic stress episodes. His body is fully healed and he will be okay. He just needs some time alone." Minato gave a small frown at the nurse's words. Looking at the door with a sad expression, he disappeared in a bright flash once again. But Naruto. Naruto looked at the crowded streets of Konoha. Looking down at the people happily walking. Naruto felt his eyes go downcast, circling the black scroll that Shisui had given him around his frame, holding it securely. The last thing that Shisui had given him before he died, and he didn't want to open it. It was hard to comprehend exactly what happened that day. Before he went after Shisui, he had a terrible feeling in his stomach. That something was happening at the Uchiha compound. And he was right, now the whole clan was dead. The one person he loved more than anything has died, leaving him. That thought alone made Naruto frown, and he quickly shook his head of his thoughts. Not wanting to get emotional, he knew it would happen one day. But not so soon. Naruto was now at a loss on what he should do. Yes, his sensei was now gone, how will he get the proper training? Someone who took care of him. Sure, he still has notes and jutsu scrolls that were given to him. Hell, he hasn't even scratched the surface on his elemental jutsu training yet. Naruto sighed as he laid back on the summer grass. Looking up at the bright blue sky, letting his thoughts wander to Shisui. Hey, you're Naruto, right? Naruto gave a sudden yelp at being addressed to out of nowhere. He looked up upward, seeing a boy about his age walking his way. He was wearing a plain gray shirt and black pants. His hair was pulled up in an upwards ponytail, resembling a fully grown pineapple. Naruto looked over at the boy in surprise, he swear he's seen this boy before. Naruto nodded his head as he sat up. Yeah, that's me. The boy took his seat next to Naruto and proceeded to lay down on the grass, his hands resting behind his head as he looked at the sky. I'm Shikamaru Nara, we're in the same class in the academy. Naruto blushed from embarrassment as he raised one hand to scratch the back of his neck. That's why he looked so familiar to him. Naruto gave the boy a sheepish smile. Sorry for not remembering you, Shikamaru. The Nara only shrugged, his gray eyes seemingly more calm than annoyed. It's no big deal. It's troublesome to remember everyone's name anyway. Naruto gave a sweat drop at the Nara's attitude. Naruto looked away from Shikamaru and back up to the sky. So what are you doing here, Shikamaru? This spot in the village is the best for cloud gazing. Naruto tilted his head, he's never heard of anyone cloud gazing. He looked at one of the giant puffy white moisture in the air. His mind flashing to the scream session he had a year ago to the giant blob of moisture. What am I supposed to be looking at? Shikamaru sighed, if he knew there would be this much talking he would have stayed in bed for the day. He pointed up at one of the clouds, grabbing the blonde's attention. It's not really about what you're looking at, it's about how. It's a drag when people force themselves to find some troublesome symbolism when it isn't needed. He said, trapping Naruto into his words, just look at it how it is. A cloud is a cloud, going wherever the breeze takes it. So free. Naruto digested each word that Shikamaru said separately. Naruto averted his gaze from the cloud and over to Hokage Tower. Just look at it like how it is. Naruto thought as he held the scroll tighter in his hands. Shikamaru observed the blonde through a sideways glance. While the Nara was incredibly lazy, not really outgoing and not really much a talkative person. He was good at observing people and understanding current situations. Naruto wasn't much of a people person when he was at the academy. Most people ignored him altogether for his two siblings Natsu and Narumi. And that scroll he was holding, his grip was tight. Almost as if he was scared it would disappear any second. He traced his eyes upwards until he saw Naruto's left eye. His skin now adorned a vertical scar over his left eye, it was still a little bumpy. Meaning it was relatively new. And the boy hasn't been seen in the academy in the last week. Shikamaru hummed, the gears in his head turning rapidly. The blonde has been absent from the academy for exactly 1 week, the same week that the Uchiha clan got massacred. While his other classmate, Uchiha Sasuke, was absent made more sense to him, being an Uchiha after all. But Naruto, he had no connection to the Uchiha clan. Shikamaru then raised his eyebrow in speculation. Unless Naruto had a connection to Uchiha and was at the compound the night Itachi slaughtered his clan. That would explain the blemish that Naruto had over his eye. And the scroll he was holding, no doubt a gift given to him before the fall of the clan. And that entails Naruto's sudden demeanor change, by the looks of it he refused to open the scroll. Shikamaru sighed to himself, he hated how damn smart he was sometimes. Look Naruto, as troublesome as it is. It would be best if you opened that scroll. Naruto looked over at Shikamaru in surprise, the blonde looked at the scroll in his hands and frowned. It's not that easy, it was given to me, and I was told to only open it once Shisui Naisen was gone. Shikamaru was caught off guard by the sudden despair in Naruto's tone. He should have kept his damn mouth shut. Naruto continued, it's hard. It's hard to believe that he really is gone. Shikamaru averted his eyes from the blonde and frowned. Naruto traced the scroll with his hands. Naruto, it's best to remember that this Shisui person left this scroll for you. He knew he was going to leave soon, that's why he prepared this scroll for you, and only you. Shikamaru said as he sat up from the grass. He gave a long stretch before offering Naruto a small lazy smile. I'm going to get home. If I'm out any later I wouldn't hear the end of it from my mother. Troublesome. He said, walking away from Naruto, waving his hand over his head. See you around, Naruto. Naruto gave a quiet goodbye, watching the boy walk off. Shikamaru did make some pretty good points about Shisui. He looked down at the black scroll again. After Shikamaru left, he spent most of his time alone trying to muster up the courage to open the scroll. Each minute making him more and more scared what would be inside it. The sun was now starting to set, making the sky have a bright pink hue as the rays of sunlight shone through the clouds. He took a deep breath, with shaky hands he flipped it open. Two small puffs of smoke erupted from the inside, making Naruto cough slightly in surprise. Waving his hand to help rid the smoke from blocking his vision. Another scroll was now seen, this one was much larger and it was red in color. In his other hand was a letter. Naruto felt his heartbeat start to quicken, he felt his eyes become glossy as he gripped the paper in each hand and began reading quietly. Dear Turtle-chan. Hey Naruto, how are you doing? I hope you never have to open the scroll I gave you. But if you are reading this now, then yes, I am dead. I hope you can one day understand why I had to write this letter, and I'll start with telling you the truth. The Uchiha clan, for the past year, had been planning to overthrow Konoha in a coup d'etat. I was tasked with a mission to spy and help the village stop the clan before it was too late. If my fears have come true, then either the coup d'etat has already happened or I had to take matters into my own hands. Naruto-kun, I'm so sorry I dragged you into this mess. I just wanted you to have a good childhood. After the very first day we met I knew you were someone special to me. But now Naruto, I leave with you my signature jutsu scrolls. In that red scroll are all the more advanced water jutsus I could find to suit your style. But the main one is my secret to the Shunshin no Jutsu. I hope you can master that jutsu to levels that I only dreamed of. Naruto-kun, now is the time where you can live your life. Make your own choices, be who you want to be. And always remember, no matter what you do, who you become. You will always be my little brother that I love no matter what. Love, Shisui Nyasan. Naruto couldn't stop the sudden tears that fell from his eyes. Each drop falling onto the letter softly, making Naruto sob into his hand. I love you too, Shisui Nyasan. I'll make sure to become a shinobi you will be proud of. Naruto suddenly froze, his heart going numb as he walked into his house. He saw his family all in the backyard, the slider door open letting a cool breeze travel into his home. The scroll Shisui had given him almost slipping from his hands as he looked at his family outside. His mother was smiling happily, his father had a proud look on his face looking down at Natsu and Narumi. Naruto heard his mother's happy voice echo into the house, making him shiver. I'm so proud of you too. It's not every day that two 8-year-olds graduate the academy early. Naruto's heart threatened to stop beating right then and there. His eyes were wide, the sudden burning sensation returning as he saw the setting sun shine down on his siblings' brand new Konoha headbands. Naruto felt a newfound rage gloss over his eyes. The anger trying desperately to block out how inferior he was feeling at seeing his siblings already become shinobi so early. The day he loses the most important thing to him, they get to graduate and become shinobi, the boiling sensation in his skin was almost too much to bear. He wanted to scream, yell, hate them. He was unaware of the sudden change to his left eye, gone was the sapphire blue that everyone was used to. It was now replaced with a dark crimson. His pupil now pitch black with 3 tomo spinning inside. The Sharingan. Time skip 4 years. I want to die. Naruto thought to himself as he rested his hands on his drooping head. Finally, after 5 years he will finally leave this hell known as the academy. It wasn't just how boring it was how extremely boring it was. Sure, it made sense if a civilian would take these classes or a newly born child of low-tier clans. They were barely teaching actual shinobi techniques or jutsu. Only the dubbed Academy 3 jutsu. That every child with a decent understanding of chakra could complete within their second year. Even the sparring was just a higher level of kids basically play fighting. They taught each kid the exact same taijutsu stance, a stance so bad that if you stepped 1 foot outside the village, you would most likely die within minutes. And to throw oil onto an already burning fire, the acceptable passing grade for shuriken and kunai throwing was a 4/10. A 4. That's basically telling the students, now don't worry kids, if you can barely hit a stationary opponent you surely won't hit one moving. Naruto visibly scoffed at his thoughts, just the mere idea of the damned academy brought back awful memories. In the beginning, it was hard just being in his siblings' shadow, since almost every kid and teacher praised them for basically breathing. Even later on he was getting overlooked for the more smarter kids in the class, like Sakura Haruno and Sasuke Uchiha. And ever since Natsu and Narumi graduated from the academy at the age of 8, a whopping 3 years earlier than normal, his siblings were labeled prodigies of their generation. While Naruto somehow got the title of dope since he had no special power of a Biju like Natsu and Narumi or even special training. And since their graduation, if possible his parents managed to pull even further away from Naruto. Spending most of their time and effort accelerating the training of the two Namikaze prodigies. Well, he didn't spend much time at his house anymore, he usually spent the night at Shikamaru's house since they became fast friends after the talk on the cliff. He wasn't sure just how far exactly Natsu and Narumi were compared to him. Well, he knew he had gotten stronger, Naruto just didn't have the right training or a sensei to even teach him anymore. And it proved rather difficult to grow when it seemed like no one wanted him to. But he now had his trump card, the last gift that Shisui Naisen had given him. The Sharingan. He first discovered that he had the Sharingan after he saw his two siblings wearing the village headband, finding out that they did in fact graduate early. It explained why he still had his left eye and only adorned a scar over his socket. Sure, Naruto wasn't 100% sure on exactly what happened that day, but he was certain he had lost his eye. And he technically did lose his eye. After he realized he had the Uchiha clan Dijutsu, he quickly rushed out of the house and to his signature training ground. Well, he really didn't know how to work the Sharingan. It felt like it was getting simpler and simpler as the days went by. Naruto groaned, he was slightly disappointed in his progress in actually using the Sharingan, he wasn't a master by any means. He would say he was about an average Uchiha genin when it comes to using it, but the feat was impressive for a non-Uchiha. He did add a lot more genjutsu to his arsenal since he got the Dijutsu, since the element of surprise would benefit him, greatly catching his opponent completely off guard. They would automatically be drawn to his eyes and bam. Caught under a genjutsu without even realizing. That's part of the reason why no one knew that he had the Sharingan. He wanted to keep the element of surprise until he couldn't hide it anymore. Also, it wouldn't look too good if someone suddenly popped up having a Sharingan after the Uchiha massacre, especially a non-Uchiha. And even after getting close with Shikamaru, he still debated whether or not to tell the Nara genius. And he didn't tell his family for, well, obvious reasons, but the worst was keeping this a secret from Sasuke. Well, he and Sasuke weren't really best friends, they did hang out from time to time. Strangely enough, it was Sasuke that came up to him first. Flashback. 2 weeks have passed since the horrible Uchiha massacre, and since Naruto realized he now had a Sharingan implanted into his left eye. Naruto wanted to smile at that, the pain was still fresh. But the mere thought of Shisui giving him the most powerful Dijutsu did bring a smile to his face. Naruto smiled a sad smile, looking at his reflection in the lake. He was sitting on a pier with his feet dangling over the edge. His Sharingan eye was active, showing his 3 tomo as he stared at his reflection. Naruto let his thoughts drift off. Letting the full moon shine down over the black abyss, illuminating the lake, giving a peaceful personality to the lake. Well, it was already past 11 at night, he knew his parents wouldn't be waiting up for him. That thought made Naruto frown. After his talk with his father in the hospital, it seemed that he wanted to finally reconnect as a family, well, that was certainly the feeling that Naruto got anyway. While Minato did seem worried about Naruto's health when he was in the hospital. As soon as he got home everything went right back to normal, if so even got worse. Since Natsu and Narumi graduated early, more of his mother's attention got put into their training. His father was a little less involved since his duties as Hokage have been taking up most of his time since the massacre. Suddenly a loud creaking sound broke Naruto out of his thoughts. After frantically deactivating his Dijutsu, he turned his head to see someone he wasn't expecting. It was Uchiha Sasuke, the lone survivor of the Uchiha clan. Naruto stayed silent as the black-haired boy walked over to him slowly. After a few more steps he finally came to the blonde, his onyx eyes looking at Naruto's sapphire as he took a seat. Naruto looked away from Sasuke, the boy slightly awkward since he had never talked to the Uchiha before. Several minutes went by as they stayed silent, letting the warm breeze caress their bodies. The air was soothing, and it slightly helped Naruto calm his nerves. In the hospital, you mentioned something about Shisui-san. Naruto blinked in sudden surprise at being addressed. The blonde looked over at Sasuke to see onyx eyes almost glaring at him. Naruto pursed his lips, the sudden intensity Sasuke was sending his way was quite intimidating. Sasuke continued, when you woke up, you said you wanted to stay with, did you know him? Naruto slowly nodded his head. He didn't know anyone else was in that room, thought just himself and the nurses. A small smile played on his lips. Shisui Naisen was the one who taught me everything I know. He basically raised me for almost 2 years. Sasuke raised a lone eyebrow at Naruto's words. Raised him? Coming from a son of a cage, it made almost zero sense. Sasuke questioned the blonde about what he meant. The answer he received stunned Sasuke. My partners don't really include me in the family. Everything usually revolves around Natsu and Narumi. Sasuke simply stared at Naruto in complete shock. The Uchiha finally looked away, looking back at his own reflection in the crystal clear lake. His eyes wandered over to the reflection of the boy sitting next to him. Noticing the large vertical scar over his left eye, making Sasuke feel something twinge within him. You know it was my brother that killed the entire clan. The blonde snapped his head over to Sasuke in disbelief. Naruto's eyes softened. Well, he didn't know much about the massacre, only that Shisui didn't actually die in the midst of it all. All he knew was that Itachi is the one that committed the genocide. He had no idea Sasuke was related to him. I came to you because Shisui-san was Itachi's best friend. They did everything together. Naruto nodded, he did remember hearing Shisui bring up Itachi on more than one occasion. He pursued his lips yet again, he was most likely the only one to know that the Uchiha were planning a coup d'etat thanks to Shisui's letters. The thought to tell Sasuke right now quickly passed through his head. But it was kept a secret for a reason, and he would honor that secrecy of his sensei. I hate him. I hate him so much. I want to avenge my clan and kill that bastard for what he did. That's not a good way to think about it. Sasuke glared over at Naruto, his head snapping over to him as he let out a snarl. His fists clenched so tight blood started to leak from his palms. And what do you know? You only lost one person that day. I lost everyone that ever mattered to me. Naruto recoiled in slight surprise, but he managed to hold his ground and shake his head. Shisui Nyasan once told me that it's okay to hate people, but you should never let that blind you from seeing what really matters, he said, making Sasuke falter slightly. The raven-haired child found it harder to maintain its glare. And what matters is that you had that special time with your family, a loving brother that is still out there somewhere, even if you hate him. I mean, you're still here, right? He said, making Sasuke go wide-eyed. The glare left the Uchiha's face as he processed every word Naruto sent his way. He never thought of it like that. Naruto looked over at him and sent a sad smile his way, the pain shining off his two blue eyes. I never got that special time with my family that I've always wanted. And my brother isn't out there anymore. Flashback end. Ever since then the Namikaze and Uchiha were not best friends, they did sometimes hang out together with Shikamaru, since Sasuke had nowhere to go and Naruto was seemingly not wanted. They all got along pretty well since all of them were reserved in their own right. Naruto paused at his thoughts, sometimes it was like they were actually completely alone, since neither Shikamaru or Sasuke were much of talkers. Naruto looked around his empty classroom. Most of the chairs were already long forgotten, there were only about 4 students counting himself as he waited to get called up. All he had to do was the basic Academy 3 jutsu, they already passed both the throwing portion and the written test last night. So the blonde waited for 1 hour to get called. He mentally sighed, even in test form he was almost at the very bottom. Next up, Namikaze Naruto. Naruto silently cheered as he jumped over his desk and down to the front of the room. The rest of the kids that were waiting to be called rolled their eyes. Most of the class didn't really care for the dope of the academy. His grades were just average and even below most of the clan heirs. So seeing Naruto attempt to show off, in their eyes anyway, left a bitter taste in their mouth. Naruto ignored the look sent his way and entered the room where the academy instructors were holding the exam. Once he walked through the large door he was met with his teachers for the past 5 years. Haruka Yamino and Mizuki Suzo. Mizuki was just like everyone else, he showered Natsu and Narumi with unneeded praise and kept him in the dust to be forgotten. Haruka was much better in the aspect of actually teaching all kids no matter who they were. While Naruto was still greatly overshadowed, Haruka was the only one that gave him a chance to actually prove himself as a capable shinobi. And while his results were minuscule compared to his siblings, he still tried nonetheless. Okay, Naruto, you know the drill. Let's see what you can do. Naruto wanted to scowl at what Haruka said. He's pretty sure Natsu and Narumi didn't have to go through all the miscellaneous shit that he had to do, like write a 4-page report on the importance of chakra. Without performing any hand seals, a clone of himself came to life right next to him. Within a few seconds the clone of Naruto then was engulfed in smoke, turning into a perfect copy of Haruka, down to the last detail. The real Naruto went to smack the clone on the head before his hand made contact with the clone, then used a quick substitution with a chair that was in the corner of the room. Soft clapping sounds echoed throughout the tiny room as Mizuki offered a strainful smile. Thankfully Haruka looked real. The clone hinged as Haruka dispersed itself as Haruka offered the boy a village headband. Great job, Naruto. Congratulating on finally graduating. Impressive move making your clone do the required jutsu. But try not to show off so much. Naruto couldn't help but roll his eyes at that. He wasn't surprised in the least, but he knew if anybody else performed like that, it would call for bonus points. And on finally graduating. He scoffed, even when they aren't here he is getting compared to his siblings. Naruto held his hand out and shook his head. Haruka raised an eyebrow at the blonde. Naruto then reached into his pouch on his leg and unclipped the hatch. After rummaging inside for a few moments, he pulled out the familiar headband that Shisui had given him all their years ago. The scared headband and the aged green cloth making both Chunin raise an eyebrow. He tied the headband around his forehead, ignoring the looks of confusion sent his way. Boy Naruto, remember to come back in 1 hour for team assignments. Finally stepping outside he felt a weight get lifted off his shoulder. He was free, finally free. It felt so good to finally be done with that hell. After a few seconds outside he saw his best friend with his arms folded leaning on a tree just outside. Naruto offered the Nara a small wave making him push himself off the tree. Aw, how special waiting for your best friend after graduation. Shikamaru rolled his eyes as he scratched the back of his head, yawning as he did so. Well, Choji already went to see his parents, a pre-celebration with his family. So you're all that's left. Naruto grinned at his friend throwing his arm around Shikamaru's shoulder, earning a yelp from the Nara. Please, we all know you love me. A sudden scoff reached both boys' ears as Sasuke walked over to him, his headband wrapped around his forehead. Naruto looked over to him in surprise. The Uchiha genius graces us with his presence. Did hell finally freeze over? Shikamaru nudged his friend in the ribs making Naruto yelp. Sasuke glared over at Naruto and crossed his arms. Sasuke certainly has changed since the massacre. While at the start he was very cold and dark, swearing revenge on his brother for slaughtering his clan. But after his talk with Naruto on the pier he changed again, and this time in a good way. He would never admit it to anyone, but he held Naruto in very high regards and respects him more than most people. He owes him that much since Naruto helped him out in a very dark time. Naruto was the only one that left an impression on him after all. Naruto wasn't nearly as gifted as his siblings, and after finding out what Naruto's life truly was, it made his respect for the blonde grow. Again, not like he would ever admit it. Whatever, baka. And I see you graduated, surprised you managed to make it through. Naruto narrowed his eyes at Sasuke's smirk, Shikamaru sighed next to them, he could already hear the blonde's response in his head. TCH. Please, even second years could pass that test. At least most people scored higher than an 89 on the written test. And there it is. Shikamaru groaned to himself as he heard Sasuke rebuttal back full force. This year in the academy Sasuke was the only clan heir to score below a 90% on the written portion on the graduation test. And Naruto was never one to pass up a chance to mess with Sasuke. Everyone knew how angry Sasuke got wherever someone mentioned it. Most people were too intimidated to say anything to the Uchiha genius, everyone but Naruto. No matter the reason, no matter the conversation. The blonde always managed to find a way to slip it into day-to-day conversation. Naruto suddenly stopped mid-sentence as the trio looked over to the streets. Most of the gradation class turned over as screeches and yells echoed into the summer air. Naruto frowned as one of the last people he wanted to see came walking over to him. Sasuke flanked his right while Shikamaru had his left, both having matching grimaces. They both know exactly how the Namikaze family treated their friend. To say they were disgusted was a true understatement. It made them nauseous down to their very core to think that some people so prestigious would literally abandon a child. Hey Otanto, how did the graduation go? I see you managed to pass. The feminine voice belonged to none other than Narumi Namikaze, the only daughter. Her headband secretly tied around her forehead. But the most distinguishing feature was not her headband, it was the dark Chunin vest she sported over her black t-shirt. Narumi offered her brother a smile, moving her eyes over the three newly made genin. The past 2 years have been very difficult for Narumi. It wasn't until she noticed that Naruto hasn't been home in literally months that something has been terribly wrong with her brother. And slowly but surely everything came crashing down on her like a pile of bricks. Remembering exactly how their parents left Naruto and how she never seemed to care. In truth, she felt like shit every time she saw the boy, it was a painful reminder of her failure as an older sister. She tried asking her parents about why they won't train or even acknowledge Naruto's presence, not once has she gotten a real answer. So each time she brushed it off, still believing they have a real reason. Then there was their brother Natsu. He followed the example of his parents, and while he didn't ignore the blonde completely, he wouldn't treat him like a real brother either. And that was her biggest problem with both her brothers. She's had countless arguments with Natsu on trying to incorporate Naruto back into their lives. But each time it always failed, with either Naruto refusing to do anything with him or Natsu getting fed up with Naruto's stubbornness. Naruto grunted at his sister, his eyes glancing everywhere else besides her. Yes, I did. Is there a reason you are here, Narumi? The red-headed girl quickly nodded her head as she forced back a frown. She took a few moments to respond. Well, I wanted to see how my little brother was before I left for my mission. She said, trying her best to sound as real as possible. Honestly, she did forget all about Naruto's graduation today. Luckily she was leaving from the west gate or she wouldn't have seen the giant sign on the academy saying graduation. Besides, Narumi continued, I wanted to see how you were doing. Naruto shrugged his shoulders, turning on his heel. He scoffed, fine as I'll ever be. He spoke, effectively ending the conversation. Narumi frowned at Naruto's back, she wasn't surprised by his answer. But she was sorely disappointed. She gave a heavy sigh and soon left the academy grounds. She had a mission to get to after all. Shikamaru elbowed Naruto in the side, softly making the blonde turn to him. The Nar raised an eyebrow. You good man. Naruto once again shrugged his shoulders, the sudden anger already gone from his body. Sasuke snorted at his side, hands rested in his pockets as they entered the academy classroom once more. Almost every seat was taken apart from a row of 3 in the front. Sounds of laughter echoed through the halls as kids talked loudly about finally graduating. But sadly their presence did not get ignored, a few heads turned over to them. Especially a head of pink and blonde. Naruto and Shikamaru gave a groan as they covered their ears. Sasuke-kun. Sasuke flinched at his name as 2 almost identical rockets came blasting off towards him. Naruto and Shikamaru took a few steps backwards, leaving Sasuke to his misery. The Uchiha sent them a pleading look, one of the only emotions he allowed his friends to see across his face. The pink rocket snuggled into Sasuke's right shoulder, emitting a moan of content from her lips. While the blonde was on his back leaning on his neck. Sasuke-kun, I missed you so much. Did you miss me? Before he even had a chance to respond, the blonde on his back scowled. Like hell he would miss your forehead. We all know who he truly misses here. Oh yeah, Ino pig, I bet he doesn't even know your name. You just said my name, Baka. Well, whatever, Ino pig. Naruto shot an amused glance over at Sasuke. That would be Sakura Haruno and Ino Yamanaka. The 2 leaders of the Uchiha fan club, while most girls in the class praised the Uchiha. Sakura and Ino were the only 2 that actually vocalized it. Every single day. Sure, it was funny for a few days, seeing how bad they had it for Sasuke, and it was always fun to see Sasuke's misfortune. But now it turned to a basic obsession for Sasuke, and while the Uchiha was still miserable. No, it still made Naruto laugh. Thankfully, and luckily for Sasuke, the scarred Chunin from earlier entered the classroom. He saw the commotion in the center of the room and his eyebrow twitched. He was so happy this year was over. Everyone shut up and pay attention. Iruka smiled when now every student took their seats. He cleared his throat before he started talking. Okay, I want to say once again, congrats on graduating. Cheers broke out in the classroom. And this year the team assignments are a little different. He said, making the students raise their eyebrows in confusion. Iruka walked around and turned the folder in his arms around, showing it to the class. Usually we assign new genin to their jounin senseis within the week. But this year's graduating class showed exponential growth and promise that Hokage-sama and I have decided that today is the day where we assign the teams. Teams 1 to 6 are fodder, we will skip them. Now team 7 will be Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, and Ken Gasai. Sensei will be Kakashi Haddock. Sasuke's head fell forward and smacked his desk while Sakura jumped up and down in happiness. Naruto shot Sasuke a look of pity before Iruka continued. Teammate will be Kiba Inuzuka, Shino Aburam, and Hinata Hikita. Sensei will be Kurinai Yuhi. All the clan heirs nodded their heads at their team. The more enthusiastic Kiba gave a happy yell. Naruto blinked his eyes, the familiar name sparking something within him. He gave a hidden smile. Looks like she passed the jounin exams. Sucks she couldn't have been my sensei. Team 9 is still in circulation from last year. So Team 10 will have Shikamaru Nara, Chimjai Akimichi, and Ino Yamanaka. Sensei will be Asuma Sarutobi. Ino groaned loudly, complaining why Kami seemed to hate her. Chimjai just smiled while Shikamaru was asleep. Naruto raised his eyebrow in confusion. His eyes scanning the classroom as he started to count the students. 25, 26, 27. What the hell, I'm the 28th graduate. He thought to himself with a frown. The class was uneven, and every kid has now been put into a squad except him. He was the only one left. Sasuke seemed to notice as well and looked at Naruto with the same amount of confusion. Iruka continued, his eyes looking down at his file in shock. Well, this is new. Team 11 will consist of Naruto Namikaze, Sai, and Shizuka. Sensei will be Anko Midarashi. The class went silent, no one even knew who those last 2 kids are. Iruka saw his students' confusion and was right there with them. He read off the file. Sai was trained under Anbu tutelage with a village elder Danzo's supervision. Shizuka is a transfer student from Nadeshiko village. She moved here last week, so I hope you will make them both feel welcomed. After a few moments of letting it all sink in, Iruka explained where they would meet their instructors. Team 7, Kakashi will be up on the roof. Team 8, Kurinai will be at training ground 21. Team 10, Asuma will be at training ground 99. Team 11, Anko will be at training ground 4. Time skip after class. Naruto stayed silent as he made his way to training ground 4. It was the closest training ground to the academy and the walk was only about 10 minutes. On his way his thoughts drifted to his supposed 2 teammates. The other male on his team was a boy named Sai, no surname. He was trained by a man named Danzo and was finally able to graduate. Naruto had no idea what to think of Sai, he hadn't met the boy yet but he was a little skeptical. He was with Anbu all this time, his strength would probably be way more advanced than a regular genin. And the lone female, Shizuka, also had no surname. Now she was a total enigma. He's never heard of Nadeshiko village before, and the info he had of her was she was already a genin before transferring over. So her strength would not be something to laugh about either. So that raised a question, was he as strong as his two mystery teammates? He gave a sigh as he finally entered the training ground, suddenly feeling inferior. As he was walking up he saw two kids almost his exact age. His brain quickly realizing who they were as he got closer to them. The boy was none other than Sai. He had long black hair with even blacker eyes. His hair was parted in the middle showing off his Konoha headband. He was wearing a grey shirt that ended right under his chest, allowing his pale midriff to be exposed. He had on black pants with his tan ninja pouch on the leg. He had a large scroll on his back and he was drawing something on a lone piece of paper. His eyes moved over to the lone girl. She also had jet black hair, her bangs threatening to fall into her emerald eyes. Her hair covering her headband from sight. She was wearing a tight blue shirt with a black cape style going down to her waist showing off her developing cleavage. She had on tight black pants on with matching combat boots. Shizuka was the first to notice Naruto's entrance. Her green eyes sized the blonde up. He was wearing a regular black t-shirt with a zipped-up red hoodie. He had loose shinobi pants that ended at his ankles. His green sandals matching the cloth on his headband perfectly. His unruly blonde locks falling into his eyes, only being kept up by his headband. She narrowed her eyes at Naruto, something seemed off about the blonde. And she didn't know a lot of new graduates to already have a scar. Shizuka. Naruto's sweat dropped, well she didn't sound much like a talker. Sai finally looked up, his onyx eyes dead of any emotion, but a small smile formed on his lips. "Hello, I'm Sai," he said as he gave a formal bow. Naruto, feeling awkward, just smiled their way, his hand coming up to scratch the back of his head. "Well, I'm Naruto. Uzumaki." That was another recent development that has occurred in the blonde's life. It's been a long time since Naruto felt like an actual Namikaze, every time someone would associate him with that family. He would always feel like a disappointment or unwanted child. So that's why he came to call himself Uzumaki. It was a small change, but it made himself feel better. An awkward silence fell over the new genin, no one really knowing how to start a conversation. Naruto rubbed his neck as his eyes moved over his two new teammates. Shizuka noticed his lingering gaze and glared at Naruto. "And what are you looking at, pretty boy?" Naruto blinked in confusion before looking away from her, trying his best to hide the soft blush that now resided on his cheeks. "And nothing, just looking at my new team." Shizuka scoffed, crossing her arms over her chest. "Whatever, if I catch you trying to do anything sketchy I'll make sure to kill you where you stand." Naruto scoffed at her, he wasn't one to just stand around and take threats. He had enough of those already. "I haven't even done anything." Sai smiled at them both. His eyes turning into upside-down U's. "You two would make a cute couple." Both their heads snapped to Sai. Shizuka, seemingly more angry, sent a kunai his way. "And what's that supposed to mean, painter?" "I mean it's pretty obvious what he meant." Shikazu glared over at Naruto, the blonde grinning mischievously. "I didn't ask you, baka." Sai never lost his smile, he set the paper he was drawing on back to the floor. "Blondie, try not to get tits angry. She has a temper." Shizuka's face heated up as she threw her arms over her chest. Naruto let a snicker leave his mouth. The raven-headed girl grew anger, but before she could do anything about it, a loud sizzling sound echoed out as a kunai embedded itself right in the center of all three genin. All three genin widened their eyes at the seal that was hanging from the back. "Head back." Naruto tackled Shizuka away as Sai jumped backwards just in time, a loud explosion shook the area, while Naruto fell to the ground with Shizuka on top of him. Sai landed next to them, his large scroll was now on the floor with his pen in his right hand. Both Naruto and Shizuka got to their feet and stood next to Sai. Naruto held a kunai in his hand while Shizuka was weaponless. "What the hell was that?" Naruto spoke, his eyes traveling a mile a minute around the clearing. Trying to locate any sign of danger, Shizuka responded. "That was most likely our sensei. It would explain why she wasn't at the training ground on time." Sai nodded his head, after a few brush strokes two small birds made of ink raised themselves from his scroll and took into the forest. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the ability, checking it off of ninja abilities he didn't know existed. "My birds are looking around right now. No one spotted." Sai said as he stayed in his position, the remaining students circled Sai watching the perimeter. Naruto continued for Sai. "All other genin tests all revolved around teamwork, I don't imagine this being any different," he said, both his teammates nodding with him. Silently thanking his late sensei for sharing that info with him. Suddenly Sai widened his eyes, both teammates witnessed this, and before they could speak a word a large-sized snake came raining down at them. Its mouth opened showing its large fangs as he attempted to devour Sai whole. Naruto suddenly appeared in front of Sai. His hands formed quick hand seals. Water style. Water shield jutsu. Naruto spun his arms rapidly as a large shield made of pure water formed from his hands. It was large enough to just cover his head as the snake bit down. The fangs connected with the water as it splashed upwards, obscuring the vision of both Naruto and the snake. Suddenly he felt a foot jump on his back and he looked up to see Shizuka propelling herself upwards. She spun in the air as what looked like hundreds of kunai rained down at the snake. Ninja art. Kunai volley. One by one each kunai stuck themselves into the snake's body. Pained hissing escaped the snake's mouth as it released his jaw from Naruto's water jutsu. The blonde jumped backwards, letting the jutsu break as Sai jumped to the side scroll in hand. Sadly they didn't communicate well enough as they collided. Naruto smacked Sai in the mouth as they tumbled and rolled on the ground. Shizuka landed next to the groaning boys as she glared down at them. Naruto got to his feet rubbing his head. Way to mess that up. Shizuka hissed as Sai smiled over at her. He got to his feet as he gave a few more strokes on the scroll. It's okay tits, it was an accident. Stop calling me that. Ninja art. Bear attack. A huge bear made of pure ink materialized out of the scroll. It easily towered over the three genin as it raced off to the snake. Another sound of a kunai soared through the air right at Naruto. The blonde seeing it coming reflected it with his own. Shizuka moved fast as she caught the deflected kunai at the hilt as a purple-headed girl crashed down to the clearing. She held a huge white sign in her hands while confetti exploded from the mouths of two snakes that were around her legs. Welcome the amazing and sexy Anko Mitarashi. All three genin stared dumbfounded. This was their sensei. No one said a word while Anko just smiled happily at them. Sure, she was late, it wasn't her fault. She forgot about her genin team and then proceeded to make the sign and convince the snakes to actually spit confetti. So not her fault. Why you're sensei? Shizuka gasped out as her eyes widened in pure astonishment. The sexy jounin swayed her purple hair to the side and offered her a wink. Sai looked over at Naruto and pointed his thumb over at Anko. It seems Tit Sensei deserves the name more. Naruto's spine stiffened as he gave a sideways glance over to the now enraged Shizuka and confused Anko. Shizuka smacked Sai on the head really hard, making the black-haired boy fall flat on his face. And what's supposed to mean? She quickly snapped her head to Naruto, aiming the kunai at his throat, and I swear if you anything I will lodge this kunai right in your jugular. Oh, it seems we have a hothead on this team. But if anything is getting lodged into something, I'll be doing it. Anko's voice spoke clearly, echoing in the clearing as she appeared right behind Shizuka, the feeling of cold steel on the young girl's neck as time seemed to freeze. Shizuka still had her grip on Sai, while Naruto was still looking down the barrel of a kunai. Anko's voice was sickeningly sweet, the huge smile forever glued to her face. Shizuka cringed at her sensei. Now don't be afraid of little Almi. I won't hurt you. She said as she slowly dragged the kunai over her neck softly. Since I can't actually kill you, you know, laws and all. I would only torture you slowly for threatening a fellow Konoha shinobi. Just imagine the soft kunai. Her voice passed her lips smoothly, making Shizuka sick to her stomach. Anko pushed the kunai deeper into her skin, drawing a small amount of blood. Pressing a little deeper. Suddenly Shizuka's body erupted into gold confetti. Anko looked on in shock as she jumped backwards, letting the confetti hit the ground. She looked behind her as she saw the huge snake she sent after the genin was now dead. That bear had ripped it to shreds, while Naruto and the remaining of his team were standing next to the ink bear. Shizuka looked over at Naruto in shock, while Sai remained impassive. Naruto grinned at his sensei's expression as a sudden hand grabbed the back of Anko's body, pressing a kunai to her throat. The purple-haired Kunoichi's eyes glanced to her side to see an exact copy of Naruto behind her. Ninjutsu, pretty effective isn't it? Anko returned the grin. When did you cast it? Naruto explained. The moment you put the kunai to Shizuka's throat. Okay, that was partly the truth. While Anko was distracted on Shizuka and while Sai was facing the ground. He had time to hide his face and activate his Sharingan. He was able to catch Anko's eyes for a split second before she was put under one of his genjutsu. It was a risky move on Naruto's part. His teammates didn't see him weave any hand seals, if they even saw anything to begin with, but he did enjoy the look of pure disbelief on Shizuka's face as he walked over to her and just pushed Anko's arms away. While Sai looked shocked for a moment, Naruto really couldn't tell since it went away as soon as it saw it. Anko let out loud booming laughter as she grinned at the blonde behind her. Her eyes glowing with playfulness, having fun pressing yourself into my blondie. The clone of Naruto turned a new shade of red as Anko teased him. Before he could move, Anko quickly dispelled the clone. As it erupted into water soaking the back of her brown trench coat. She took a few steps closer to the new genin and smirked. Her tongue coming out to lick her lips hungrily. I will say you three surprised me greatly. Not only were you able to kill that snake. She said, pointing her thumb over at the dead snake. You managed to surprise a Jounin level ninja, and you did it with amazing teamwork, with only knowing each other for not even an hour. I'll say that's worthy of passing. Naruto physically beamed at the praise, trying his best to rid the giant blush on his face. Shizuka was a lot more compassed since she was already a genin from her hometown. But she couldn't stop the small grin from forming. Sai remained impassive, his eyes stayed blank, but a faintest smile was noticeable, it was subtle but still there. Now we are officially Team 11. Now get ready for fucking hell. Okay. Please report everyone. Minato said happily as he clapped his hands in joy. Out of all jobs that Minato absolutely hated while he was Hokage, he was always excited for the graduation of academy students. Every year he looks forward to it, and this year was no exception. Looking out in front of him were 9 of the strongest Jounin that Konoha had to offer. And the test results that Iruka had given him told him that there was a very promising bunch of kids this year. He couldn't contain his excitement and decided to give the kids Jounin senseis the day of. He smiled wide as he gestured to his only student in the room. Kakashi-kun, please report. Kakashi sweat dropped at the Hokage's attitude, putting down his infamous Ichi Paradise book, he scratched his cheek with a sigh. Team 7 consisting of Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, and Ken Gasai. Pass. The whole room was in shock at hearing him actually pass a squad. Even Minato was slightly at a loss for words. Really? What made you pass them and not any other of your teams? A man named Asuma Sarutobi said, taking a long drag of his cigarette, making the woman next to him elbow him slightly in the ribs. Minato nodded. I would also love to hear this, Kakashi-kun. The silver-haired man shrugged his shoulders. Well, at first they were just like every other team I had gotten before. Attacking me all separately and with no plan. The Haruno girl wouldn't stop following the Uchiha kid around like a lost puppy dog. It was really hard to watch. That doesn't explain why you passed them, Kakashi. Kakashi turned his head and gave his signature eye smile to Kurinai Yuhi, waving his hand in the air. I'm getting there, Kurinai. It wasn't until the last 10 minutes of the test that they coordinated an attack against me all at once. Of course they didn't push me very hard at all. But it was a valiant effort. But finally showing signs of teamwork, I decided to pass them. Minato smiled at his explanation. Happy to hear that Kakashi finally passes one of his teams. His eyes shifted over to the person next in line. Kurinai-san. Please report. She nodded, looking back up to her Hokage. Meeting his eyes and she swallowed a grunt. Teammate consisting of Kiba Inuzuka, Shino Aburam, and Hinata Hyuga have passed Hokage-sama. She said, making him nod his head. They all worked well together from the moment the test started. It was a good improvement to Hinata-chan as well. Kiba-kun seemed to help her break out of her shell a bit. That's wonderful, I was worried that her shyness would interfere with her abilities. He said, genuinely happy to hear about the girl's improvement. Kurinai nodded before stepping back into place. Okay, Asuma Sarutobi, how was Team 10? The big burly man smiled as you would expect. Hokage-sama. Shikamaru Nara, Ino Yamanaka, and Choji Akimichi performed perfectly. Minato grinned as expected from the next generation of the Ino Shikacho trio. Last but not least, Minato turned his attention to the last shinobi in the lineup. He felt his enthusiasm start to die down a little as he dreaded what was coming next. Anko Mitarashi, report on Team 11 please. Anko snapped to attention at being addressed so suddenly. She was slightly embarrassed since she was too preoccupied looking at all the pictures that hung on the walls of the Hokage's office. She never knew all the past Hokages were hanging on the wall. She grinned happily as she saluted her leader playfully. Team 11 consisting of Shizuka, Sai, and Naruto Namikaze passed with flying colors, Hokage-sama. She said, not noticing the sigh of relief that Minato breathed out. He was nervous to hear that his youngest wouldn't have graduated, but if he didn't, would it really be his fault? Minato shook his thoughts away. I see. That's wonderful then. He said, making Anko nod. Yes, Hokage-sama, they all work surprisingly well together, despite only knowing each other for only about 10 minutes prior to the test. She said, shocking Minato. She continued, they managed to kill one of my snake summons, and Naruto and Shizuka were pretty proficient with their ninjutsu, and that Sai kid was a front runner for ninjutsu. But Naruto, man, did he surprise me. She said, getting everyone present to look at her in question. Minato felt his hands clam up, afraid to ask. How so, Anko? Asuma asked, he was pretty intrigued himself. He had somehow forgotten that Hokage-sama had a third child. Anko turned towards the Sarutobi. Well, I was threatening the Shizuka girl, you know, kunai to the neck, trying to scare her. Everyone pleasantly rolled their eyes, typical Anko. When she just exploded into a ball of confetti, and before I even noticed that blonde gaki caught me in a genjutsu with a kunai to my neck. The room fell silent, shocked to hear the report on the third Namikaze child. Kurinai was probably the least shocked at hearing that the blonde boy she hadn't seen in a very long time was on Anko's team. She smiled to herself, happy to hear that he was still pursuing genjutsu. Her mind started to drift thinking about him, she hasn't seen the kid since her promotion to Jounin almost 5 years ago. Really Anko? How'd he manage to do that? Asuma said, his cigarette having already fallen out of his mouth in shock. Even the usual stoic Kakashi couldn't help but show a hint of surprise. Anko shrugged, I'm still not really sure when he did it. But it had to be quick, he never weaved a single sign. And as far as I know you can't perform a genjutsu without hand signs. Kurinai shook her head. That's not true, you can, but it takes an incredible amount of stability and chakra control. Only masters of the art are able to do it. Anko nodded, grinning, then I might have a genjutsu prodigy on my team. Sweet. He wasn't a one-trick pony either, he had a pretty strong water affinity. She said, turning her attention back to Minato, raising an eyebrow in curiosity. Any reason on why he didn't graduate early with his brother and sister Hokage-sama? He definitely is higher than genin level. She asked, making all eyes turn to Minato. His head started to ache as he panicked at all the expected shinobi eyes on him. He coughed into his fist. Anyway, thank you Anko-san. Everyone is dismissed. I have some important things I need to look over. He frantically said as one by one the Jounin started to leave his office. Unbeknownst to him were the narrowed eyes looking his way as they left the room. Minato put his head in his hands, sweat starting to form on his brow as he looked down at his desk. I don't know what to do. Thank you for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see the next part, don't forget to turn on notifications by hitting that bell icon. Please like, subscribe, and comment below to let me know your thoughts. Check out my other videos for more content you might enjoy. Until next time, take care.